and gentlemen, here it is, the most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
Hi, this is Jake Tokup with Rocky Mountain Construction, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge Podcast.
Hi, this is Adam Sandy with Zamperla, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge Podcast.
Hi, I'm Arthur Levine from About Theme Parks, and you're listening to Coaster Challenge Podcast.
This is Marcus Lashak, the Roller Coaster Bureau Chief at WGN TV Studios in Chicago. You are listening to the Coaster Challenge Podcast.
Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Yes, I accept the Coaster Challenge. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Coaster Challenge Podcast is here. It's time to face your fears. Get that theme park therapy and lend us both your Coaster Challenge Podcast is here. Your fear can disappear. We know that theme park therapy can dry up all your tears. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Yes, I accept the Coaster Challenge. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? We accept because you know we're not average.
You're listening to the Coaster Challenge Podcast. A journey where people become fearful to fearless, all from riding roller coasters. So please, secure your hats and glasses and keep your hands and arms inside the podcast. It's time to accept the Coaster Challenge with your hosts, Andrew Locke.
Hi, everyone. This is Andrew, one of the producers of the Coaster Challenge Podcast. I've got a very special guest here with me today. So, as all of us know, as enthusiasts and theme park and coaster lovers, there aren't a ton of ride manufacturers and coaster manufacturers, but there are definitely a couple of handfuls of them, a few handfuls of them, and enough where they are, certainly all over the world, or at least kind of in several different areas. There's some here in the US, there's some in Asia, and there's certainly a number of them in Europe, in particular Germany. And it's not surprising for me personally, as a lot of our longtime listeners, I should say, know, one of my other hobbies besides theme parks and coasters is cars and sports cars. And so this is kind of an area, kind of a personal thing for me. I've always been very impressed with Germany's engineering. Their prowess is just, it's almost second to none in the entire world, even compared to the Japanese and here in the United States. And you can see that again with their automobile manufacturers, for example, the incredible high quality and renowned companies like BMW, Porsche, Mercedes, Volkswagen, Audi, etc. And so again, it doesn't surprise me, or probably most of us, that Germany would have some great ride manufacturing. So we're going to talk to one of those today. Coaster Challenge Podcast is proud to welcome from Maurer Rides Business Development Executive, Steve. Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on today.
Awesome. We're glad to have you. So you're the latest in a number of ride manufacturers, coaster manufacturers that we've had on, and we want to interview all of them, because we're not looking to make any preference towards one or the other. Just like we're trying to interview as many parks as we can. We again had good success there as well. So we're excited to add Maurer Rides to our stable, if you will, of companies that we've connected up with. So before we talk about Maurer Rides, we're going to talk about you personally, Steve, and kind of hopefully learn something about you and maybe help you learn some things about yourself at the same time and learn about us. So to start with, in terms of that learning process, why don't you tell myself and your audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where you live and your background, your enjoyment of the parks,
Sure.
And I know you work in the industry, obviously, maybe your history of working in the industry, that sort of thing.
Yeah. No. Thank you so much for having me on today. I grew up in Orlando. Like a lot of kids, I had the opportunity to go to the Disney parks. When I was a kid, there was only the Disney park. Universal wasn't around. And I have a big imagination. And so I enjoy going to the parks and being immersed in that heavy theming that Disney does so well as a kid. And I just always enjoyed, and I still enjoy that when I go to a park. It's probably the first thing that draws me to a park when I go there is I start to see the theming and how did they do it if it's a theming park. Of course, I see all parks of all levels. So some parks are not a theme park, they're an amusement park. And if it's a carousel, it's a carousel today, right? Which is fine. So I take that for what it is, but then I start looking at the carousel and say, well, why do I like this carousel? What do I find unique about it? And so I take it all in totality. And so growing up in Orlando gave me a an experience at a young age that a lot of people would probably envy. From that, the biggest challenge that I took from my life when I was 17, I had some exchange students from Germany in my high school here, and they asked me if I wanted to be an exchange student in Germany. And I was 17, and that's a big thing to do, but I did. And at the time, my German was terrible. I took 2 years in high school, and I could say my pencil is yellow, and that's about it, right? But then I came back. I went to University of Central Florida, and I took a degree in finance, but I took German on top of it. And at the university level, they don't really play around. You have to learn your German. So wir können die ganze Tag auf Deutsch reden. Bei mir ist es egal, welche Sprache das wir benutzen. I can use both languages, and it's not really that difficult for me, which is a bit unique for Americans, and helps me quite a bit in some of the meetings in Germany, right? So from that, technically, I got into roller coasters. I've been in sales almost all my career, but I worked at the parks for 9 years, like a lot of kids growing up here from 16 to 25. And so I worked in operations, Magic Kingdom, monorails, Epcot. I have some of my best friends from Norway. Back then, I worked as kind of a foreman job, the Norwegian pavilion. So the 9 years at the park I didn't know it at the time, has helped me tremendously in my career. And so, but I didn't know it at the time. So when I came to work for Maurer, they said, yeah, let's talk about your background. Well, 9 years in the park, technically in roller coasters with one of the sub-suppliers, was a really good fit. And I also spoke German reasonably well. And so my German's very good, like beer garden German. My technical German, not as good. If you ask me what devil is in German, I'd have to go look it up. But conversationally, it's just fine, right? And so this has led me to be in the industry for now a total of 30-something years, which is a nice industry to be in. I found my career, and I was quite lucky with that.
Wow. Okay. So a couple of things to unpack there. I just want to kind of just to verify. So you said you worked for the parks for, what was it, 9 years, like 9 operationally? Years.
Correct.
And then
25.
Okay, so 25. And then is right after that when you wound up at Maurer, or did you have other jobs?
No. So I completely went outside the industry into sales. Okay. And I worked in the paper industry, covering Florida and Alabama. And and then I had no idea I was going to come back in the industry. And then, like a lot of our challenges, we just got out of COVID. 9/11 hit in my world, and I got laid off with 6,000 something other people. And I feel for the people who suffered during COVID, because I got kicked out the doors making all my sales numbers. And I was, it was just, they just said, hey, we're cutting back. And that's the way it was back then. And so, but one door opens and one door closes. I'm a firm believer of that.
Oh, me too. It
just happens, right? And so,
Yep. So when did you join Maurer?
2007. So what is that? 15 years ago, more or less?
Yeah, 15 years. Wow,
15
nice.
years. Yeah, so
nice.
15 years.
Impressive.
So all over the world. It's been
very impressive. Yeah, no, you've had quite a career. And you mentioned 9/11, and we're very passionate about 9/11. We're unfortunately, a lot of Americans, and we don't get political on the show, and this isn't really political at all. A lot of Americans, sadly, in my opinion, have, even people that like you and me that are old enough when we were adults on 9/11, they've forgotten about what happened, and they don't look back. And every year I post about it. I wear a special shirt that's in remembrance of 9/11, and to the point where in our first season, and you might want to, if you're curious and interested, go back in our archives to September 10th of 2021, so a couple years ago now. That was our first year of having an episode right around 9/11. It was literally the day before 9/11, because we released on Fridays, and it was September 10th, and came up with the idea, about 3 months prior, with a former guest of the show, good friend of the show, who was in New York on 9/11 and had to rescue his brother-in-law, who was in southern Manhattan, in lower Manhattan, in the thick of things. He wasn't in the World Trade Center, but he was nearby. And get him himself and his brother-in-law off the island successfully. And so we talked through the whole story and the details and what he saw and witnessed. And it was a fantastic interview that we released for September 11th. And we released the episode a year later, this past year, 9/11. But yeah, feel free to check it out. It's a very powerful episode. We also include some other testimonies from other friends of the show, former guests, and some audio clips. And so
it's interesting. I almost never share this with anybody, but in my walk-in closet, I have a picture of one of the planes hitting one of the towers that I keep in my closet as a picture in my closet because it's so kind of depressing and hard to see. But it reminds me every day when I wake up, you never know what's going to happen today. So make this a great day and do the best you can today because you don't know what's going to happen. I have that in my closet and I see it every morning when I wake up.
That's incredibly powerful. I love that. I absolutely love that. That's really fun. Wow. That's very poignant. Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Steve. Sure. That's incredible. So you mentioned, that you worked in the parks and obviously worked for Maurer. So in terms of because, in this first part of the interview here, we're going to be kind of talking about you as a person. Are you, someone who is more of like, you consider yourself maybe an enjoyer of theme parks or someone who enjoys coasters or what do you think of yourself?
Yeah. So my background, probably less of a coaster enthusiast than probably the majority of the people on here. I love parks. Like I said, I like being immersed in a park, seeing it. And so I consider myself a person who enjoys park, but not probably the level of enthusiast. I do look at it at a different way than a lot of people. So when I walk through a park, I try, because it's part of my business, to see what other people are enjoying. What are they looking at? Why are they going to where they're going? So I kind of see it with a different eye than maybe some other people would look at it, because that's just part of my livelihood, right? And
sure.
But do I go on every single Saturday? No, I have all kinds of things that I enjoy. I'm a competitive swimmer.
Nice.
So I've been swimming butterfly, backstroke, all that my entire life. I'm 56, and I still do it. I swim 3,000 meters at a practice. Wow. And so I like the challenge. And part of challenges in our world at a park, I enjoy the fact that some of the rides, like the coasters, are a challenge. And so when I go to swim, some of those are a complete beatdown. It's a lot of them have been racing, and you have to get your head in the right spot to accomplish whatever you're going to accomplish. And some of the coasters that are the more extreme ones, I won't say they're more of an accomplishment. When I get off, I've accomplished something.
Sure.
This is another ride that I might enjoy a little bit more, just for me personally, that maybe has bunny hops in it, in the design. And I just think bunny hops are fun, right?
Right.
Why are they fun? I don't know. Why is blue and green's green? It's just fun, right? And so
there's something about airtime. It's sort of like almost like makes you laugh and makes you giddy. Airtime is very popular. You're not a coaster enthusiast, but you just kind of hit on a kind of bullseye right there. Not the only thing that us as enthusiasts tend to like, but most enthusiasts consider airtime the most important. Personally, not me. I love airtime. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong, but it's not my number one. It's like maybe like my number 2 or 3 as far as the things I because we analyze coasters as enthusiasts. Sure. We the layouts and the features and what's better and what's worse and rankings, where I get into all that stuff, and a lot of us do. But most enthusiasts, airtime is like number 1.
Oh, so then I'm kind of happy, because I feel like I'm part of it, because Mako is one of my favorite coasters.
Oh yeah,
great airtime. Yeah. It's just it has such nice airtime. And our, like you mentioned earlier, our industry is extremely small, and Sophie Boliger with B&M and I are really good friends. And I'm like,
nice.
I like Sophie. I like your ride, Mako. It's really good.
Mako is one of the best airtime machines, and I love it for that. I enjoy Mako. I think Mako is the best coaster to this day. It's not the newest, but it's the best at SeaWorld, and for that reason, it's a great airtime machine. Lovely. So one more quick kind of follow-on question to that first question I asked you, and then we'll move on. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned about learning German, in college, and fortuitously because of the exchange program, and then later, I believe things happen for a reason in life. Like you said, and one door closes, another one opens. So you've been at Maurer now for 15 plus years, and I'm assuming you go to Germany, maybe not during COVID, but normally you go there at least once a year, right, for meetings.
typically before COVID, almost every year, at least once, if not a couple times. Just depends on projects. I travel quite a bit, so having been to Germany, to Munich's a beautiful city. If you've never been there, it's great. I usually go to Oktoberfest and I take customers there, which is great. I call it babysitting with beer because someone has to pay the bill at the end of the night and make sure we get home to the hotel. So I have to make sure I'm the guy who has to make sure, because I speak German, I know what I'm doing, and the Germans know I know what I'm doing. And so I love taking my customers and say, hey, you all have fun, have great times. I wish I could tell you all the great presidents and stuff I've taken to Oktoberfest with me, but we basically say, hey, we're all going to go have a good time and nobody's ever going to hear about it, right? So
it's like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Stays in Vegas.
Right. What happens at Oktoberfest stays in Vegas. I get it.
We drink a lot of beer. I'll say that.
Right. I get it. Yeah, I need to get to Munich. I love Germany. I've been there a couple times now and need to get over to that part of it. But I keep getting caught on the very west part of Germany for reasons that will come up actually later in the interview. I know from kind of prepping beforehand, but we'll get to that. But so obviously, so you go to Germany maybe once a year. And obviously, I'm sure you have your colleagues from Germany, from Munich, from the headquarters, and maybe even other parts of Germany that are natural German speakers. I'm sure they come fly Appa every year, and you probably see them other times of the year, right?
Correct.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay, I'm the only American who works for Maurer. Everyone else, for the most part, is German. They have a couple of international people, but at the office, if you go to the office to Maurer, it's 99% German.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, you have Zoom meetings, I'm sure, Teams meetings, and because I know what your job is like only because I work in sales too. I know about entertaining customers and constantly having meetings with customers and colleagues. And so what I'm getting at with all that is, I'm just curious. It's just a curiosity question. Is your German good enough that you say have meetings in German and you're speaking in German?
We can. In fact, we switch up. But typically, I would say no. Most of the meetings are in English because typically I'm bringing customers from America with me so that we all understand. We typically stay in English. And then, as you can imagine, there's only a few coasters sold in Germany every year. So the language of the business is all in English because that's the business. So I would say. But that said, if we don't have any customers, we actually just kind of bounce them forth between English and German. Just let's say we're at lunch without any customers.
Right.
Depends on how the conversation flows.
Sure, makes sense. But it's nice you have that flexibility that you can speak in German. And
Correct.
Nice. And I made 2 visits to Germany myself last year, both for fun, because of my love of parks and coasters. And I discovered, and not just one park, but a couple of parks especially. In my opinion, Germany has some of the best parks in the world, if not, the very, very creme to the creme. And it's fascinating to me because I grew up, I've traveled a lot in my life, but I grew up here in the U.S. with Disney, Universal, and, Dollywood and Silver City with great parks. But Germany, there's something special there, and I'm trying to figure it out. And maybe you'll wind up maybe you'll wind up helping me in the interview when we talk about some of this a little bit later. But maybe it. But it's fascinating to me, and I feel like I need to start learning German because German. It's like the French. The French have a reputation. The German people I've met, like at the parks, that work the parks, they're so nice. I have a couple of I guess employees, team members at one park in particular that I've encountered more than once, like in my visit in October and then again in December, and they recognize me and they're so nice. And again, they don't have to be. And again, they're German, and so it sort of goes against that stereotype, that sort of rigid stereotype of Germans. But anyways,
I think they're very service oriented in many ways, especially in the parks. They just have to be. They realize that the other Germans won't tolerate that if they're not.
I see. Right.
So the tolerance level for Germans is a little bit higher. Less. They're like, listen, you have to have it correct, and a correct place at the park needs to be friendly and on point. And if you're not, we're going to have a discussion. right?
Interesting. So it's okay. So that regimented approach, but regimented in terms of you have to be very nice. It's like
there's expectations on
right.
Expectations are more strict, I would say.
Yeah, they take things very seriously, but that seriously can be you need to follow these rules and be this way. And that makes sense. That definitely makes sense.
Although I have to say one thing, that there are some parks, there's one outside of Munich that has patron related or guest related self actuated rides, which we would never.
I know about those.
All the lawsuits we have in the U.S. would never allow it. So, but the Germans are very much like, hey, you need to take care of you, and that just wouldn't fly. When you go to a park here, they're like, no, you should kind of leave your brain at home, and you just have to have everything, triple, double, quadruple checked in the United States. It's a little different. Yeah,
that's something I've talked to my I call them my Euro-enthusi friends.
Yeah.
So my European enthusiast friends that I've met and met up with over there, and we compare the U.S. to Germany and to Europe, because some of that goes beyond Germany. But things like rapids rides not having any kind of restraints. Again, that would never fly over here in the U.S. But I think also that affects things in positive ways, because ticket prices, the price you pay to go into the parks in Europe, is so much less expensive in the U.S. And I'm sure part of that is the insurance cost that we have to pay.
Correct. Yeah, no question. The lawsuits and things are just impacts costs for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right. So let's go ahead and start into our theme park time machine. So the first question is kind of a starter question for that, and then we're going to dive into something deeper than that. And that simply is, what is the first coaster you remember experiencing?
The very first coaster that I went to when I was very little, or I couldn't be that little because they let me on the ride. So I'll say probably 11, 12, maybe a little younger, was Space Mountain. And I went with my grandfather because my mother was not having it. She wasn't going to go on it. So my grandfather said he'd take me. And so he took me on Space Mountain, and I remember walking off, and he's from North Carolina. And he said, "Oh my." That was his full extent of getting off the ride, right? Me, of course, I was just over the moon with just, I thought it was just great, right? And so yeah, I guess, and now that I'm way into my position, I think Space Mountain in Florida is the second oldest steel roller coaster, I think, something like that. Matterhorn, I think, in Disneyland is the first, and I think your enthusiasts will definitely correct me, but I know it's old. Yeah, it's old.
Yeah. I mean, I know that the Matterhorn is the first because that's well known. There's a documentary about it that the ACE, the American Coaster Enthusiasts, which is one of the coaster clubs I'm a member of, they did a wonderful documentary of it. Actually, know the main guy, friends with the main guy that did it. He's an amazing talent. We're actually planning on having him on the podcast. But anyways, I know that was like 58, 59, but and I know that the two Space Mountains, I think those were next. And
it had to be in the top five, right? As far as oldest.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Disney World was first, then Disneyland's like a couple years later. It was like 75 and then 77, I think. But I never thought about, were there any steel coasters from the very late 50s, right after Matterhorn, through the 60s into the early 70s, and there may not have been. That's a good question. That's a good question. But I know that there started, there were a lot of coasters that came in starting in the late 70s and through the 80s, especially with Arrow, who made Matterhorn and both those Space Mountains. They started doing a lot of coasters for regional parks. Six Flags was starting to rise up and everything else. But into the early mid 70s, maybe not. That's a good question. But interestingly enough, you mentioned 11 or 12, and you mentioned you had to be that age. That was my first coaster as well, because I grew up in New Jersey, so we would go to Disney World as a kid once every few years. Visited grandparents down here too, and I was 4 years old, and I rode that. That was my first.
So yeah, maybe I was younger. I just now that I'm older, it's hard to pinpoint. What year you were, right? But
I get it.
Yeah,
sure. I totally.
But I had a blast. I remember coming off there, and of course, the younger you are, at some point you're afraid of everything, and at some point you're afraid of nothing. And I was kind of in that afraid of nothing phase of my life. You don't know. You're like 5, 6, 7, and everything's awesome. And so
right.
I didn't. My point is, they didn't take me on the ride dragging. At that point, I wasn't afraid of anything. So.
Well, it's I love it when guests create great segues in interviews. It doesn't happen all the time, but you just did. So you talked about, at some point in our lives we're afraid of everything. At some point we're afraid of something, and I think actually that can go. It kind of starts off we're afraid of nothing, then we're afraid of everything, and then our fears dissipate. And that's the fear journey of life. And the next part of the interview, actually, and again, great segue. Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Is our what we call our fear journey, and it's a kind of part of that life's fear journey, if you will, and it relates to how the parks affect our fears and how we improve upon that with the parks. Now, I know, as you mentioned, you're not a coaster enthusiast, so these next few questions, you can think about a coaster, it may be a coaster, or you can think about rides. Like you obviously. You talked about it. Was Disney the only park you worked for, by the way? The various Disney parks.
Yes, I worked for Disney for 9 years, and that was the summer.
Okay. So I'm guessing you spent. You lived here in Orlando, and I'm jealous of that, by the way. I moved here 5 years ago. You lived here for all those years, and good jealous, mind you. I'm guessing you spent a lot of time at Disney World, especially working there, right?
Oh yeah. So worked in the Magic Kingdom for I guess 3 or 4 years, Monorails for a couple of years, and then Epcot for 3 or 4 years.
Right.
Somewhere in that math.
Right.
So, yeah,
gotcha.
All the parks all the time, because we as employees could get into the parks free.
Right.
Your friends had worked there as well, were free, so we would always pop around all the parks and see everything as much as we wanted.
Sure. Yeah, it's good life. No, not bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so it could be at Disney World, or maybe it's somewhere else you've been to, but wherever it may be, a coaster, it could be a drop ride, Tower of Terror. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but
sure.
What would you say is the ride or the attraction that has scared you the most in life?
It has to be all the rides that have a very, very high. I'm not afraid of heights if I'm restrained, but
right.
I've gone mountain climbing. I was just down to Argentina in September and October, and I was climbing up from 6,000 to 9,000 feet with a guide, with a little teeny ledge with snow and ice and 500-foot drops.
Wow.
And my palms are sweaty, and there's 25, 30 degree angle up, and we're doing this for 8 hours. And for me, this is mental work. And I told my guide, I said, this isn't easy for me. I am working right now. I am working on the next step. I am working on putting the right foot forward. And some of the rides, there's 2 rides for me that are like that. If you go up like the Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland, it's very high.
Oh yeah.
But B&M coaster.
Sure. Yes.
That lift towards the top. At some point going up that lift, my brain's going, I really shouldn't be this high. I don't know. I shouldn't be this high. I'm not afraid of heights, but my brain just kind of clicks and goes, I really shouldn't be this high. But then my logical brain working in this industry has helped me tremendously, because I start thinking of all the safety stuff we do, and really it's just in my head, because you're like we talked about that it's safer on a coaster than you are in a car going down the street. And so
yep.
So, but there's just kind of the same moment when I'm mountain climbing or hiking high altitude, that I've just I kind of go, ooh, I'm not sure about this. Maybe also, so the anticipation to me is harder than the reality. So, and it's the same thing on the launch. So if you get on a launch coaster and it's, Top Thrill Dragster or something like this that just goes from 0 to 100 or what have you in a couple seconds. Anticipation is harder for me than the actual moment. And the same thing when I get to the very top of the hill and I look down, which terrifies a ton of people, doesn't bother me at all. Once I get to the top, I'm like, all right, let's go. I'm ready to drop into it. But the anticipation is worse. Also, I do quite a bit of public speaking. So I get up in front of, 50 to thousands of people. The anticipation is also hard for me. And you just have to know that it's a challenge that you can overcome. And you just say, okay, let's do it. And you just do it. And so but we all face our challenges, and you decide whether you can do it or not, right? So
Right. So yeah, I mean, I just want to go unpack something right there before we get to the ride itself. So yeah, you made some good points there. You talked about for yourself the anticipation is worse than the actual event. The launch, right before you launch is the worst part. Than launch. Yeah, or the queue, or yeah, of course, the queue
you're
line
looking
before,
at this going, I'm not sure about this, right?
or it could be driving into the park and driving into Magic Mountain, for example, and seeing X2 hulking right there, and then thinking about what the coaster actually does and the spinning and everything else, and seeing that vertical drop, and it's all that stuff. It's all that is part of the anticipation leading up to getting into the coaster. And some people, once they're restrained, to your point earlier, that's when the anticipation sort of dissipates and they start feeling okay. For some of them, they have to actually be starting to go through the ride. Actually, the launch or the lift hill is done, and they're kind of in the moment of that speed.
That's where I am. Once we start moving like past the lift hill or into the launch, actually the launch goes, then I relax and I start enjoying it.
Yeah, and you mentioned, absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. That's how most people are. You mentioned public speaking. A lot of people, myself, I've had to do a lot of public speaking because the nature of some jobs I've had. Before sales, I used to be a technical trainer for a software company and did training for other companies. I would teach sometimes 50 people I didn't know, for a whole week. And I've had other, I would run for school office in school. I was, in my fraternity that I was in, I was an officer. I had to, I had to be out there a lot. And, over the years of just doing that, I got better and better at it. But yeah, it was always the nervousness before the speech or the whatever it was I was going to be doing in front of people teaching. But then in the moment of it, once I'm doing it, I'm feeling good because I like doing it. I like that stuff. Teaching people.
To back up just a second, back when I remember my very first public speaking, and maybe also on a coaster, it might be the first time going through a coaster. My first time giving a public speech. Yeah. Actually, it was some sort of German thing in school, and I had to give the speech in German, and I was terrified. I would rather have all my teeth extracted than to do the speech. And I went to the bathroom afterwards because, I was done with the speech and I had to go to the bathroom. And I remember somebody coming in the bathroom and said, "Oh, did you see that one guy up there?" And he was referring to me. He was so nervous and scared, right? He was talking about me, and I thought, oh yeah, you're right. That was me. I was terrified and scared. But as you pointed out, the more you do it, kind of like riding a ride that it may be difficult, you accomplish it, and you find it easier typically when you do it more and more often. And so I challenge myself when I have a chance to public speak to do it, because you'll get better at it.
No, that's awesome. That's fantastic, and doesn't surprise me at all that the more you do it, the easier it becomes, because that's how it is with any sort of fear mechanism.
At the end of it, I love the payoff of being a swimmer. The accomplishment of doing something difficult that is difficult. It's difficult for you, but the payoff and the accomplishment has its own rewards, and usually I find that to be very satisfying.
Absolutely. And that could be certainly the case with swimming, with public speaking, with coasters, with rides. This all comes down to fight or flight.
Yep.
And if you retreat, you didn't have to face what it was. You have that respite, if you will, but you generally don't feel good about yourself and all your friends that did, so. But
I do have to say there's some days that I'm just not in the mood to have the fight. And so some days I'll go and I was like, you know what, today's not my day for this. I will fight this fight another day. I'm not going to go away, but I just, I don't want to, let's just say this very crazy coaster is terrifying for me, or not terrifying.
Right, and it's difficult. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Today's not the day. Okay.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to be that way every day or every time. It's just if you were to do it a lot or do it all the time, that's where it's problematic. But
correct.
As it's starting to stay, with the flight, you may feel good because you avoided what it was, but then generally what happens is you start feeling bad because you're missing out, or you feel like you disappointed yourself, or your friends might make fun of whatever. There's all sorts. It depends on the circumstance and what's going on. Now, if you fight, it is a little bit more in the moment. In that anticipation we talked about, it's scary and sweaty palms and all that. But once you hit that apex, And again, the apex could be getting restrained, or it could be, once the launch happens, or once you start going lift hill, or maybe it's not until you're, for you, like most people, when you're really at speed, the launch is done, the lift hill is done, and you've got then the adrenaline and the endorphins and all that kicking in. That's the reward. It's a big reward. So, and plus you feel proud of yourself afterwards and accomplished, like the work to use your words. So it's all positive stuff. But again, you don't have to do it every time. The key is to make those steps, to do it here and there. But in any case, right. In any case, so what is the ride or the attraction that is it Leviathan?
Yeah, for fear, I'll name that one, but any of the ones that are similar to that, where you would
sure.
you would have a really high lift or a very fast launch. It's funny, I used to think, what is some of the launch coasters like Top Thrill Dragster? I think it's from 0 to 100. I might be off on that. 100 in a couple.
It's about it's a little more than that, but 120. But yeah.
And then if you ever get a chance, go look at a video of a fighter jet taking off from an aircraft carrier, and they go from 0 to 120 in 2 seconds. They actually go faster. They look slower from the video, but those guys really kick it on the aircraft carrier. 0 to 120 in 2 seconds on a catapult launch. So. Oh yeah.
No, you are. You're hitting one of my. It's not one of my passions or my main hobbies that I identified as someone, but one of the things I love, and I love things that go fast. I've ridden motorcycles in my life, owned sports cars. I own one of the fastest cars in the world currently, which I'm very proud of, and I have so much fun with it. But I love fighter jets. Not that I've ridden in one. That's one of my dreams, is to ride in like backseat of one or something. Yeah. But I've been to so many air shows. Love the Blue Angels, but I love Top Gun Maverick's one of the best movies that came out last year. Part of it was the theme of it, and I love seeing those. I would love to see like a fighter jet just take off, like be on a carrier deck when it's taken off, and you hear how loud it is and see it. But yeah, I totally agree with you. And by the way, it's funny you mentioned Top Thrill Dragster. Then you mentioned aircraft carrier with a catapult launch, because the technology that Intamin used, not to mention one of your competitors, but I mean, you guys don't compete in that space.
Oh, we're all good friends. We're all good friends. Totally.
But the technology, the hydraulic launch system that Intamin uses for things like Top Thrill Dragster, Accelerator, etc., that is a similar technology. It's a catapult launch. So
correct.
Yeah. So basically, Leviathan is a B&M Giga. That's right. And Intamin and B&M, they're the only ones that really operate in that market. It's basically a coaster over 300 feet tall, with a conventional lift hill. That's sort of what a Giga is considered to be. Fury 325 is another one of them. Mako, you mentioned, that's a B&M Hyper. 200 feet and taller. So I'm curious here. So Leviathan, did you ride Leviathan before or after Mako for the first time?
Before.
Right, because Leviathan came out about 4 years. It did be about 4 years.
I remember riding it specifically with the park president in the front seat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's like, "Hey, let's just skip the line, Steve. We'll go right to the front." And I'm like, "Okay." So we're like, click, come up the hill and just chatting away. And but when it kind of got towards the top, I'm kind of like, "Hey, we got a great view up here. We're really high."
All right, so you rode Mako later. Okay, so hopefully I'll remember. I'm gonna follow up something in a couple of questions here. We're gonna revisit Mako in this regard. But before we get to that, so you're just talking a little bit about riding with a park president in the front seat. This great place to ride. And you're like, a little nervous. You're looking around, like, oh wow, it's a great view from up here and all that. And you have that nervousness. And so, but tell me, obviously you got through the ride.
Oh yeah.
Tell me, how did you feel after you got off the ride, off Leviathan?
I go back and I critique it in my head, because that's my job.
Yeah.
So unlike probably a lot of your riders, I kind of once again look at it a bit differently, and I go, hey, how were the transitions? I started looking at it technically, and so to answer your question directly, I go, that ride had a lot of good airtime. It had good airtime, really big hills and airtime, and I really enjoyed it. And the only thing that I won't say it's just normal for me, is that when it got really high up there, the anticipation gave me a little bit of the willies, But that was it. Once it got going, I was having a great time. And so
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when when I walked off the ride, I was thinking about the airtime. Like that ride has great airtime.
Okay. Got it. So we talk about getting the willies. It's mainly on that lift hill. It's that right before, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Once I look over the top and down the hill, which probably terrifies a lot of people, I am fine with it. I'm like, all right, let's roll. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Now, I've not been to Cali's Wonderland. That's on the short list for me. I'm hoping to go there in June because I've got a wedding to go in upstate New York in June. But I know of Leviathan.
Yeah.
And of course, it's B&M Giga. It's got great airtime. So, it makes sense you would think about the airtime afterwards. Now, maybe when you're still on it, or maybe a little while later, you must have at some point thought about, because you talked about that accomplishment aspect, you thought about facing your fear on it. So how did that, what did you think about that after riding it?
It just triggered a memory. I had not thought about it until you just said it. The restraint was the first time I had taken that new B&M restraint. It was simply holding your legs and
T-bar
down.
Yeah.
That was the first time I had ridden a coaster from them like that. And I thought, man, that kind of restraint kind of gives me a high pucker factor. I was like, because all the airtime in the seat, and there's no shoulder restraint, and so that was neat to me. So that fear was like, I know I'm not going to fly out of this, but this is the first time in this restraint, and I wasn't expecting that. And so I was walking away. I go, that restraint's got a little bit of a pucker factor to it. So.
Yeah. So, absolutely. And that's part of what makes those more exciting. Mako's very similar in that regard. So did you have any thoughts about that you had faced your fear successfully on this really tall coaster, or, this one that you now identify as the one that scared you the most?
Right.
Did it affect how you in any way in terms of how you thought about coasters moving forward or rides that are tall?
I mean, honestly, so that coaster was probably the first Giga coaster I went on, and once you've done that and you go to another one, you obviously reference back to I did the other one and I did just fine on it. So once you've done one, even though it's not the same, you definitely reference back in your head going, no, I've done this before. And so and the good news, probably, that I didn't think too much about it. Raphael was the park president at the time. That I was walking with him, and there's no way in hell that I was going to say, "Hey, this coaster, your brand new one, scares me. I'm not going to go on this."
Right.
There was never a chance that was going to happen.
No, that's an extreme version of something that I went through in my life, in my fear journey with coasters. So many other guests of ours, friends of mine, is that peer pressure. Now, usually it's not a park president. Right. Usually it's just friends. For me, it was my friends in high school, but it's the same thing. It's just a more extreme version. Yeah. And that's almost more fear inducing. Yeah. I didn't ever look at it and go, I'm not going to go on it. But looking back on it, there would have been no way in hell I would have said no. I'm not. Right. And so you rode Leviathan right when it opened, I'm guessing? Or?
Yeah, I would say I was up there by happenstance within the first month of its opening. And
so in 2012, right. Yeah. Now, have you ridden since then Fury 325?
I have not. I need to do that. It's on my list, but no, I haven't done it. So
okay, what about, have you ridden I-305 at King's Dominion?
No, so unfortunately, some of these rides that I would like to do, with my job, they don't typically make the decisions at the park. So they make it at the park.
Okay.
So I've been to all the parks at some point in my 15 years of career, but some of them ones like that I've got a tight window. I don't have all day to spend at the park, and it's not looked right. And so some of these, they're on my list to do, but I haven't done it. But I've done a lot of them. A lot of rides, but just not this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. Traveling for work, I travel a lot too, but it's, I don't necessarily go to the places I always want to. It's not necessarily as glamorous, like even working in the coaster, theme park biz. You don't necessarily, you're not playing in the parks. That's not what your job is.
Yeah. So very often, people have this idea that all I do is go around and ride roller coasters. And
right. Yeah.
I wish that was the case, but reality is, like you just pointed out, very often I'm in a boardroom, the park is closed, and that might have been the case. I might have been at the park and it was closed.
Right.
And I'm sitting in a boardroom and there's snow outside stacked up in the window, and we're looking at Google Map pictures and drawing on paper. And so that's very often what I do. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. The off season or whatnot, of course. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. Makes sense. Well, so I did remember, so I do want to revisit this, especially since the couple of the other ones that I mentioned you have not been on. That's fine. That you certainly have been on Mako. You rode Mako, at least, a number of years later after Leviathan. So.
Sorry, just to answer your question, maybe I can help you out a little bit. The one that sticks out in my head is the Intamin coaster at Cedar Point.
Millennium Forest.
Blue Street?
Yeah.
Millennium Forest, that's it. I was going to say Millennium Forest. That one sticks out in my head as another one that was quite high, right? Because
now, did you ride Millennium Forest before Leviathan? Because it was built
that was a long time ago. So I did ride it before. No, I didn't. Yeah. No. Back. Honestly, I don't remember.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to start to stutter here. But I think I rode Leviathan first, and then because I think the other couple times I was at Cedar Point, the park was closed, like I said.
Right.
And then by the time I got there on a day that it was open, I think IAPA had some sort of event there, and I got to the entire park while it was open, and that's when I rode it. So now I got it clear in my head. So
okay. Well, no, that's totally fine. No worries. Our memories can sometimes fail us.
Yep.
I'm not too far behind you in years, so I can relate. So actually, I'll give you the option here. You can think about Millennium Force in this regard.
Okay.
Mako, or maybe there's a little bit of both, but talk to me in the frame of, you identify as Leviathan, having ridden that before these other two, as the one that scared you the most, and kind of talk about that, how you experienced, how you felt about that afterwards and during. So how did you look at, how did you feel riding, say Mako, Millennium Force, and how did what you faced in Leviathan affect that?
Like I said a little earlier, just to reiterate, you already know you've done something. You realize, hey, I can do this because I've done it before in a similar fashion. However, that doesn't mitigate the fact that you may still have that same feeling for a second time, because it's just you're way up there, for example, or it's a launch. You just can't help feelings. Feelings are feelings. They come when they come. And so, but when you walk up to the ride, at least for me, my personal experience was walking up to the ride. I reference in my head, like, I've done this similarly there. This will be fine. It'll be good. It'll be fine. Come on, let's go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Now you talk about that sort of those feelings you might still get, going up the lift hill, on the launch and so forth. And again, I know you're not a coaster enthusiast, but given the nature of your work, you do go to parks sometimes and you do ride these rides, and, sometimes you're with, sort of VIPs, park presidents or whatnot. So you've ridden, rides, over the years, and since 2012, I'm sure you've been on a few coasters and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
So do those feelings that you talk about that are still there, have you noticed they've dissipated at all as you've moved on?
Sure. Just like with the public speaking, the more you do, the less that becomes a fear that weighs in your mind, right? I think but also just like public speaking, if you're not doing it on a regular basis, because for me, it comes in waves. Sometimes I'll do some, and then it'll be a year or two before I have to do something again. Those feelings creep back. It's just the way feelings come and go. And so you reference that, of course I can do this. I've done it before, and I'll do it again.
Right.
Yeah. And it is, and you look for the payoff. And what's the payoff? The payoff for me is, once the coaster gets going, I'm enjoying the entire ride, right?
Exactly.
We're game on. And then the feeling of accomplishment that I didn't chicken out and just skip the ride is also a feeling I enjoy, right? Like, I accomplished it.
Right. So what you just shared makes a lot of sense. And I was expecting to hear this, was no guarantee. And it's we're sort of doing this sort of informal study, we're not part of an IRB, we're not doing a medical study, we're not doctors, but we're on a journey with our guests. We're now in our third season. We've talked to all sorts of different people, from people like yourself that just work in the industry that maybe even aren't, enthusiasts. We've talked to people that aren't enthusiasts at all, but just for that other reason why we talk to them. And of course, we've talked to people that are very, passionate about coasters and parks and all that. And the story is always the same for the most part, is that if they had any fear, and we've had a couple guests that really have never had fear in their lives, which is interesting. That's a whole other story. But, most people have gone through a fear journey. And what we found, and what I kind of describe it as, is if you face your fears, like in these controlled ways, if you keep doing it, whether it be riding the same ride over and over again, or probably more effectively riding different rides, different coasters, could be similar types, but different layout, different heights, indoors, outdoors, the whole thing. What happens is really fear, which is part of the mind. It's like strength training. It's like going to the gym.
Right.
And it's really powerful though, because, okay, sure. On the one hand, I feel this way, and there's a lot of people I know, a lot of enthusiast friends that I know, where they've just faced fear so much that they can ride any coaster, and they even go beyond. They can get, bungee jump and, go on a sky coaster, or even skydive. I've got a friend that's a coaster enthusiast, and he's skydiving all the time now.
Sure.
He's trying to get certified, and and it's just fearless. And but then you can go beyond that, sort of those physical stuff. To your point about public speaking, is by facing fear in these controlled and fun ways. To be honest, obviously it's fun stuff too. These parks, these coasters, it better prepares you to deal with what can be anxiety-provoking situations in other parts of life. Very serious, important parts of life. Public speaking, test taking, interviews, which is like public speaking. I've gotten really good at interviews. I mean, all modesty aside, I'm a pretty modest person. I feel very good about myself and how I interview for jobs. And I've gotten better at it. And maybe it's partly doing all the interviews before, but I firmly believe it's the fear facing that I've done at parks and on rides, because I definitely see it translates, and other guests feel the same way, that it translates into other areas. Facing into one area helps you in another, and that is incredibly powerful.
No question.
Like you said, for public speaking.
No question. I remember my first job interview, my father sent me to a friend to interview because he knows it's hard. He said, go interview with my buddy. He won't care if you mess it up. And he came in, and I came in. I was so scared once again, So yeah, you're going to face a lot of challenges in life, and just know it's natural, and you work your way through it, and exposure and experience helps you make it through, right? And so, yeah.
No, absolutely. Well, Steve, I appreciate you going through the fear journey with me. And, I know we started off, you're not a coaster enthusiast, but I think your fear journey it's pretty powerful. And, some of the things that you realized, right afterwards, and how you feel like you were rewarded for facing fear, and how it's helped you with public speaking. And, that's, especially working in sales, public speaking is really important. So, I appreciate you going on that journey with me. And even though you're not an enthusiast, I think it was a powerful one for you.
I'll just say, in my career, I just love our industry. It provides so much for a lot of people in different ways that you don't really expect until you kind of get down into some of the discussions like we're having today. But I think it's a lovely industry. I can't, having been in sales in a different industry, in the paper industry, before I came back to the amusement industry. There's about 200 people worldwide that we all know each other. And it's nice that we get together at these conferences with my competitors and people like this. And we just all enjoy our company. And that's not always the case in a lot of business. And so it's good people, and it's, we enjoy what we do, and we enjoy people, making people, better in their lives, whatever that means. Maybe that's today, or maybe that's, accomplishing something, right? And so
yeah, for sure. You mentioned, the couple hundred, around the world and so forth, that work in sales in the amusement industry. So I'm guessing that at IAAPA, which is easier for you to go to, right. Obviously live in Orlando, that you look forward to IAAPA every year, seeing clients, of course, meeting with clients, it's a big deal for you sales wise. Yeah. But also seeing, the even the competitor colleagues, that you have, just seeing everyone and partying and having a good time. You look forward to all that, right?
Oh, without question. But it's a long week. So if you know everybody, and if it's interesting walking the floor, if you know everybody and everybody knows you, it can take a long time to make it to the restroom and back because you have to stop 20 times. Everybody wants to catch up, right? And you just have to plan ahead.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I mean, I've been going to IAPA myself, representing Coaster Challenge since 2019. Right. So every year, obviously 2020 didn't happen, but I've gone every year since, and each year it's more and more meaningful in the ways we're talking about for me. Now, I'm not in sales, and I've got a separate day job. I actually wish I worked in theme parks and coasters and worked in industry like you do. But this is not how my career took me. I took a break from being in the industry, in terms of being an enthusiast. With college, I kind of just wound up working in other areas, and I've got a great career. It facilitates me to do the things I love, to have the cars I love, to travel, so I'm not complaining,
Good.
but, and then, thankfully, and again, things happen for a reason. Meeting David at an ACE seat filler event for the opening of Electric Eel at SeaWorld San Diego, in 2018, right before I was moving to Florida, like literally 2 weeks. We just happened to be there at the same time. We didn't know each other and never talked before, but because we met that day and liked each other's company and got along well, we're talking in line. And just one thing led to another. We start going on other rides there besides what we were there for ACE, and kept in touch. And I wound up all of a sudden helping with Coaster Challenge later that year. And look where it's gone, where it's taken me. So in a way, not having a job in the industry, this is the next best thing. And yeah, one of the things I get to go to media events and represent the channel and meet with parks and manufacturers and get to rides, and get POVs. And, it's really, all that's fun. And going to IAPA, again, representing the channel is fantastic. And so it's the next best thing. And for me, each year is more meaningful because I know more people, whether because of the podcast or friendships I've made, or even knowing manufacturers, and just seeing people, running into people like left and right, turning a corner and like, oh, hey, how you doing? It's so great to see you. And and it's very social, and I love the social aspects of this hobby. So
yes,
yeah,
it's an interesting journey, because I think part of this business, because I do get a lot of people saying, oh my goodness, you have my dream job. I'd love to sell coasters. That's be just the most amazing job. And I have to say that part of that is experience. I mean, if you look back at my career path of 9 years working in the park, I have the right qualifications. I work technically in roller coaster with another German company. I speak German. All those things add up. But also there was an opportunity by chance. So chance plays a big, if you look at the 100% equation, a job opening, there's a lot of people who can do my job for sure. But it just happened to be, I happened to be in the right place at the right time. My boss, who's now retired from Maurer, who hired me, I went to the IAPA show and we started talking in German. And then after a couple of years, he said, I need to hire you. And so, chance favors the prepared, but chance is part of that equation. Right?
Oh yeah, I firmly believe in that. And so many things in my life on a regular basis. Some of my other hobbies that I do, is timing is everything. I mean, timing is so much in life. And to that point, my life is not over. I like to think that I'm in the middle age, and I like to think I'll live another 30, 40, 50 years. And I'm a hard worker. I don't plan on retiring young at all. I might even go well past the retirement age. I like working. And, you never know where my career might take me. And maybe I will wind up working in the industry, whether it be, because of sales. If you can sell, this, if you worked in paper and now you're in theme park, if you can sell in one industry, you can sell in another. It's all about that personability, building rapport. And so, yeah, with all my sales experience, because sales is the newest part of my career that's been going on since like 2013 or so. And I keep getting better and better at it, because practice makes perfect. And so you never know where I might wind up in the industry, or maybe as a retirement job, because I don't plan on leaving Florida. Maybe I'll be one of those people at 75 or whatever, that's, working in the parks, part-time, so.
It's something I've thought about too. I used to love driving the boats out in the lake at Epcot.
Yeah.
I thought, this was a great job if you wanted to retire, but not really.
Right. Exactly. And so you never know, but in any case, so moving on from the fear journey here. So I have a feeling, this is kind of a low hanging fruit question because, you work in the industry, but, feel free to answer how you like. How have coasters and parks, just in, I know that you're more of a parks person, how have they had a significant positive impact on you besides, say, what we've kind of honed in on here, that, for example, you riding these big coasters and facing your fears helped you with public speaking? That's a great win. You feel good riding the coasters. Is there any other ways that the parks and coasters have affected your life in significant ways? Yeah, again, it's a given that you work in the industry and you love it, 15 years. But is there anything else? That's the low-hanging fruit. But is there anything else?
Like I said, we talked about a little bit before. I like the immersive aspect of it. I do find, especially, I like the cutting edge part of some new technologies coming out there. It was interesting when we saw, for a while there, a little bit of a blurb with virtual reality goggles on coasters and things this. And now we're looking at augmented reality and where will that go into 3D immersion, and where will things go? I find that's quite fascinating when I start getting into some of the newer stuff that's coming out. And my point is, like the virtual reality goggles, I thought, oh man, that's kind of probably really take off. And it kind of just had a little bubble and a hit, and it never did. So it's interesting to me what becomes really big and permanent and what doesn't. Back to low-hanging fruit, we put the coaster on a cruise ship,
right?
With Carnival, and that was something that when I happened to know the cruise ship from my previous job, and I went and sat in a cubicle with Ben, who's head of naval architecture for Carnival, and we just sat and talked. And I said, I think I got something for you that will work. And then all of a sudden, when they rolled it out at IAPA, it had over 1 billion hits. It was they said it was the biggest marketing thing that's ever hit cruise ships and way past anything in the amusement industry. And I'm just sitting in a cubicle, just thinking, I think this will work, Ben. What do you think? Right? And later, we were at the inauguration, and he goes, Steve, he goes, I remember you sitting in my cubicle pitching this, and being the good sales guy, I go, and it was true. I said, yeah, Ben, but you took all the risk, right?
Right.
Which is true, right?
Yeah.
And here we are opening. So my point is, some of the things to answer your question that I find very interesting is how will all this new stuff work, and how is it coming together, and how are things. Look at the Spider-Man thing that Disney did in California, where it's a robot, and I'm sorry if I gave that away, but there's a robot flying. There's Spider-Man.
You're like talking about Santa, yeah.
But things like that, where are we going to take this? I find that part of the business, because everyone's always asking me for the next interesting coaster idea, and of course the Spike system, not to pander to that too much, but has a lot of innovation on it. And being at the forefront of the innovation that allows new things to happen on a ship, allows things to happen in a park, I find very compelling and interesting.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I can relate to that. And again, I try to relate to my guests as much as possible, as you can see in my interview style, because it's just more interesting that way and fun. And it's like talking to people. Again, I'm in sales, it's no surprise there. But, I'm an engineer. So yeah, I'm a sales guy, but my background is I actually have a degree in optical engineering. And so I didn't start in sales. I started because of my degree. I started, I was doing R&D in labs, and then I started doing like tech support and applications engineering. And I just kind of gradually transitioned into customer facing roles because I work well with people. So, I believe your career generally will take you in places, if you kind of let it happen naturally, where you're best fit, because you're going to do well in those, the places you're passionate in. And that's what happened with my career, because I love working with people. I love traveling for work, which is that working with people that involves that, and eventually wound up in sales. But again, I have that technical background, and that's where I also come to with parks. Is like you talk about, you walk in a park and you're looking, they enjoyed that. Okay, where are they going next? How much time they're spending over there? Similarly, when I go to parks, I'm enjoying the parks, but I'm also looking at how did they do that? Like the first time I rode Forbidden Journey, which was in California, I lived there before I lived here. I was one of my first rides on it. Yeah, I was turning my head away from the screens, away from the animatronics and I was looking at those other Kuka arms, and I'm like looking at how big they are and how they move around, because I want to know how they work.
Sure.
And I also more recently, I was trying to figure out how the throughput works in that ride. How do all these arms move through? Where they're not getting backed up, and I realized, there's 2 sets of screens for each set of, and then, I'm figuring out things over time. And the same thing applies with coasters, and so that's the engineer in me. So I totally relate to where you're talking about how technology is making the industry exciting, and I'm looking forward to what the next 10, 15 years is going to be. In my opinion, and I think a lot of people say this, starting with Potter in 2010 at Universal, and continuously since then, we have been in a new golden age of parks. And COVID nearly destroyed that. But because of how resilient this industry is, because of how much momentum there was before, because of Potter and Star Wars and all this other IP stuff and the technology, I believe that COVID was a blip. And we're still haven't fully recovered in the industry, but the industry is definitely strong again. I mean, look at Universal's profits and Epic Universe, and so we're still in
the Disney side of the financial books are doing well too. I mean, they're
the park side,
the park side is doing fine.
Yeah, it's the media side that's the problem.
The media side is hurting.
Yeah. So thankfully we've got better leadership now, and I believe they'll get strong again in the media side too. But so the parks, we're still in this golden age, and part of what's making this a golden age is it's the IP. Certainly the IP is a big part of it, but the other is the technology that supports that. And you and I, we established before we started recording that we live very close to each other here in Orlando, so we're on the doorstep of Epic Universe. And talk about technology, we know some of the things that's going in there with Nintendo and other, and it's just like, but the things I don't know yet, that we don't know yet, the specifics of like the Ministry of Magic ride system, and you have to go beyond the rumors of the details, which you don't have because the rumors, and it's like how is the mock racing coaster going to work, and all this stuff.
So I'll give you something that I think is cool. Yeah, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I like these guys. They're out in California, and they're. I don't know if we'll get to the point where we can integrate them, but I'll just say it. So there's a company called Ultraleap, and they're based out of Silicon Valley. Okay. And they make ultrasonic haptic feedback. So they have little teeny mic. If you go on their website, they have the little teeny speakers, and with the ultrasonic sound, they make vibrations to your hand.
Okay.
And feel things in air, but you can't hear it. So you can feel. So I'm wondering if this will evolve to where you could go to SeaWorld and pet the lion, and you can feel the fur on the lion, but of course you can't get out to the lion and pet it. But for small kids, this would be amazing. Where could you take this? Could you make spiders that go down you in a haunted house, right? From ultrasonic waves. The problem a little bit is that your clothes block some of the waves signals, and your hands have a lot more sensitivity on the bottoms than they do on the top, and your hair blocks some of the stuff. But maybe a waterfall, you step through a waterfall, you can feel it, but you don't get wet. Some of these things I just find, hey, where can we put this on? And there's a lot of creative people in our industry that are better at this than I am, and find maybe some cool applications for the future.
Well, did you ever get to experience the Void?
No, but I want to go do it. Yes, okay. I know about the Void, but I want to go do it.
That is a small part of our industry. Maybe it's not over. I hope their story is not over, but that is a small part of the industry, at least as of right now, here in 2023, that was deeply affected by COVID and still is. And it's really unfortunate because I love virtual reality and augmented reality. I've done it from various sources. I've done the IMAX. Yes, IMAX, not with big screens, but that company does have that. At least they did in LA. I did that, and I've done others. And I think the technology keeps getting better. I haven't set it up yet, but I just got a Sony VR2 because I'm a PlayStation guy. But the void is the best of what I've experienced in that arena, and part of it wasn't just visual. You felt heat, you felt vibrations because of the backpack you wore. So you talked about VR being on coasters and being a blip. Yeah, we're probably not going to see a big resurgence of VR in coasters because it's not a good fit, because coasters are too physical, they're too intense. But look at AR on the Mario Kart ride. That's going to happen here in Orlando. It's happening in LA right now, in Japan. We're going to see other VR, AR things happening as the technology gets better and better. And this company, right, that you mentioned, if they're not already looking at partnering with VR companies, AR companies, maybe I need to get a job with them. But I mean, it's obvious to me that's a perfect partner technology for VR and AR.
No, they came to one of the TEA events, the Theme Entertainment Association events.
TIA. Yeah, I know TIA.
Yeah, and they were focused a little more onto the gaming world. But they thought they saw there was possibilities in the amusement world, and so but back to you, everything kind of went silent during COVID. Yeah, and so I'll probably reach back out to them. But anyway, Ultraleap is a neat company. Whether they'll actually make it into our world, we'll see, or whether they'll do something.
Yeah, sounds pretty cool though. It sounds like a good extension of what I've experienced elsewhere. Yeah, great. Okay, well, let's move on. We've got the next part of our interview, kind of the middle of the interview here, is usually a fun one. And, I want to remind you, you can answer these next 3 questions in terms of coasters or just theme park attractions, rides, flat rides, again, drop towers, could be dark rides, water rides, whatever you want. Just have fun with it, whatever comes to mind. So first, what is the craziest moment you've had on a theme park attraction? Or any kind of themed attraction or amusement attraction?
The craziest. So I'll say when I'm little, the teacups were probably the crazy.
Well, what I mean by crazy is where it was not what you expected. Things. Okay, as you work in the industry, the big joke, so to speak, especially like Universal and even Disney, is the story of any given ride, especially a thrilling one, is something goes wrong.
Oh yeah.
Right. Okay. So what I'm talking about is, not the joke, not the storyline going wrong, because that's the storyline gets pushed forward, but literally something going wrong. Like evacs, or the ride broke down and this happened. Something wild happened because some other person was, not normal on the ride, and they were drunk, or I'm trying to feed you, but I'm just giving examples.
I'll tell you a story that I've never really shared to anybody, but it's so long ago that I don't think Disney will care.
Okay, I'm curious.
Because they don't have these monorails anymore. So I used to drive the monorails back in the day, right? And it was going around from the Magic Kingdom. That was the ones that goes around to the hotels. We were at the Polynesian. Well, it happened that one of the maintenance guys decided to hotwire the switch that goes behind to the back of the Magic Kingdom. And I happened to be in the monorail at the time, and there was another driver who was brand new who was driving the front of the train. And I heard through the radio that I was not the driver, but I was in the back, and I heard something about a switch going on. So anyway, the long story is, to make it short, was I called up to the front cab and I told the driver, I said, hey, I think they're doing a switch. When they do a switch, that switch is completely open. And so the monorail can derail. And so I called the front driver and I said, hey, just go slow up to the switch. I swear I think they're doing a switch, because normally you can never approach it because of the computer system. It would never let you do it.
Yeah.
But because the maintenance guy overrode it, because I guess it went faster, he did the switch open. So we came up to the open switch where there's a drop off, and the train would have gone right off the edge. The monorail would have gone right off the edge had he gone full speed. And we stopped, and nobody got hurt, and they put the switch back, and that was pretty terrifying to be very open. But that guy got fired. The maintenance guy got fired, but
no kidding,
as you can imagine. And this was way back in 1990, 89, something like this. And so all those monorails are gone. they have brand new monorails that have completely different systems, and I'm sure that couldn't happen today. And
okay, so I'm guessing first of all, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. This not that there's a competition.
That story, huh?
This is not a competition, but this is one of those questions where we get crazy stories because that's what the question is.
Yeah.
Your story is the craziest that we've had. We've had some crazy ones because literally lives were at risk, and because of what you did. If it weren't for, I mean, be honest with me, if you hadn't done that,
it would have gone right off the edge.
And you had guests on the monorail.
Yeah, it was late at night, but probably like 10, 11. So the front cab and the first cab had guests from the hotel, so it would have gone off the edge.
I mean, you averted a tragedy. You're a hero. I mean,
yeah, I did. Yeah. But, I was 18 at the time. You just it just rolled.
Right. That's amazing. I mean, that's something you should really be proud of. That your quick thinking. That's.
Yeah, wow. Also self-preservation.
Well, yeah, no, but I mean, give yourself credit. I mean, I appreciate it.
I'll just, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, it was just, something unexpected, and you're like, okay, I think this is what we need to do.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, I'm guessing so that era, was that still the Mark II monorails, the second gen monorails?
Is that right? The Mark IV, I think. Gosh, I'm having to think way back then.
Was it for fourth generation by that point?
I think so. Or maybe Mark IV was what they replaced ours with.
Okay, maybe it was Mark III then. Okay. Yeah.
But I know those old ones. I mean, we had nothing was electronic. It was all logarithmic system in it. So
right.
I know all that's gone. Right?
Yeah. Now I'm just trying to understand. So you're talking about a track switch.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it the track switch would ever need to be in a position where it would be open, where it would create an open gap?
If you look between the Magic Kingdom and the Contemporary Hotel, those parallel tracks are always locked into position. But there's a maintenance spur that transfers and moves over out of the way late at night when they have to take the monorails back to the shop behind the Magic Kingdom.
Which I know where that is. I've seen that. Yeah.
So 99% of the time, they're always locked into one position. They can never go off the track. But late at night when they're moving guests over, once again, the way it's set up, had not the maintenance guy overridden it, you couldn't even get close to that open gap without the whole, even back then, without the whole system shutting down.
Right.
Since there's no power on that track, and it would feed back to your emergency brakes.
Oh, I see. So it's for the track switch. So basically, it's swinging it over like to left or right.
Correct.
Where it would theoretically connect up with another line if other things were done.
Yeah. Just think of like a regular choo-choo train track. Just move over.
Right. I gotcha. Now I'm with you. Wow. That is. I mean, I know you were not certain of that story, and I realized part of it was. If it was okay to say it's been so long, I think that's fine.
It's so long ago, right? This was forever, and everytheverything's changed. So
no kidding.
Don't stress over that if you go to the parks, because that's long gone.
Wow, that I have one of my coaster enthusiast buddies. Actually, we need to have him on the podcast. He works the monorails currently.
Okay.
And he's been there a while, not going back that far, but because he worked at Disney Paris like before that. But anyway, I'll have to, next time I see him, I'll have to tell him about this. He'll think that's wild.
It's a wild story. That's the way to say it.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So my next question for you is, again, coaster, theme park attraction, whatever you want. What is your absolute favorite thing? Like if you go at any park, what one do you want to ride?
Great question. Of course, I'll have to say it's a little bit on my mood, right?
Sure.
I would say, gosh, and it sounds super pandering, but I like the feeling of kind of flying, and I like Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket if you sit in the front seat of the first car. The back seats, when we were designing that coaster, Maurer made the coaster.
Yeah, of course.
The seats are stadium seating for that design, which we don't make that design anymore. And when we made this in the computer, it looks great when you make stadium seating, because the person in the back can look over the person's head on the front stadium. problem is with vibrations and high G's, there's some flex in the back seat.
Yes.
And so there's kind of a lot going on, and especially the last seat, the last car. So it's interesting watching people come off that coaster, because people in the first seat, the first car, are like, wow, that was great. The ones back are like, wow, it's kind of rough. Well, there's a bit of flex going on in those seats as far as the turns, and then also the coupling bar is kind of like a boat and a trailer a little bit, kind of dynamic.
Oh yeah, sure, lever arm. It's a lever arm.
Yep. And so anyway, but if you sit in the front seat, the first car, late at night over the park, and you go into the non-inverted loop, playing, for me, hit Rap, Beastie Boys, Sabotage. It just syncs up perfectly with that coaster. So that's Steve Boney's recommendation. Beastie Boys, Rap. It's the first one of each: Rap, Beastie Boys, Sabotage. And so
interesting. Okay,
so up the lift, it's like,
okay,
and then you're right over the top, and off you go, right? And so
yeah. Okay, so you opened up, I want to say can of worms, but you opened up something there. So I want to talk about it. You'll like this. You'll like this.
Okay.
Okay. So my journey with Rip Ride Rocket, Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket.
Yeah.
So it starts with I did not go on that ride I had not been to Universal since like 2008. So it was shortly before that ride opened.
Huh?
And I moved, right before I moved here, a year before I moved here, I visited here, not related to moving here. Just I had friends that worked for Disney, CMs, and they got us into the parks for the whole week for free. And they're amazing friends. They're great friends of mine now. I see them all the time because I still live here. And there was an opportunity I could not pass up. So for Thanksgiving week, we came into 2017. And we just did, we only did Disney because, free tickets, we're kind of captivated by that. And I had not been to Disney in a while either. So, but my friend, who's, she's not a coaster enthusiast or theme park enthusiast, the kind of one of the people that works at these parks, part of this family, friend of ours, I was talking to her about Universal, like what's new at Universal, how's the Potter stuff there, blah, blah, blah. And because I was curious. And she told me, and I saw a picture of Rip Ride Rocket, and I asked her, wow, this looks like a cool coaster. I didn't really know anything about it. None of my friends talked about it. And my enthusiast friends talked about it. She said, oh no, we don't go on that. That ride's way too wild. And we've heard it's crazy. I'm like, okay. So that was my first experience just hearing about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved here in 2018 and got a Universal Pass about 5 months after moving here. And I wrote it, and I did not ride in the front. And I'm like, two thoughts I had. Well, three. One, the music aspect, choosing your own music, so much better than Rock and Roller Coaster.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Two, great layout. I love the layout of it. There's sort of those switchbacks, sort of like quick transitions, like Intimate is known for. That you guys, I've never seen anyone other than Intimate do that, and I love that part of it. But the third one was I did not sit in the front, and I found it rough, very, very joltish, and I'm like, so, and I've ridden a number of times since then.
Right.
But I don't think I had not ridden the front for the most part. I just haven't. Right. They're not long trains, So a friend of mine was visiting. This is literally a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in the mood to do Rip Ride Rocket. It was the end of the night, and I hadn't ridden Rip Ride Rocket much at night. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny you mentioned what you mentioned, because he said, yeah, let's do it. And I told him, yeah, it's rough. He's like, oh, I love Rip Ride Rocket. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, you got to ride the front.
Yep.
And so we did. Maybe it might have been my first night ride and probably my first front ride. And having me focus on it, I'm like, yeah, it was a much improved experience.
Sure.
And so now connecting up with you, working for the manufacturer, and I appreciate the honesty. Yeah, I get it. And the engineering, it makes sense. The lever arm of the back seats being higher. Yeah. So now I have a better appreciation for that ride.
Sure.
From my friend and now what you said.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense.
And so if you go on that ride, since we're all being cozy here, it doesn't take too long to wait for the front seat of that one. You walk up and you say, hey, it's got a really long front seat one. Here they just say stand over to the side for just 1 second. And so it doesn't take too much to just wait for the front seat. Some people have told me they don't want it because they don't want to see the drop on the other side. So if that's an issue, that's an issue. Right. But to your point, a lot of the parks are even more magical and beautiful at night. And so if you're at Import on a beautiful evening and you're on that ride and you go through that non-inverter loop, just cranking a good song, it feels like you're flying. And I find that a really compelling ride.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the lighting package, you guys did a great job of the lighting package on that. And years later, it works. And one of my favorite coasters, Velocicoaster, the lighting package has major issues.
And you have to give credit where credit's due. A lot of that was Universal. Universal, when they came to us, they said, we want it to look like this. We want to have a sound package that was there.
Okay.
But Maurer had, as you said, not a long train, so they could make a lot more dynamic movements.
Right.
And so the smaller, two couple trains allow for very dynamic turns that you won't see on a typical, let's say, B&M, which would be very long sweeping turns.
Yeah, length of train makes a difference in terms of what you can do. Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah. But yeah, I have a better appreciation for that ride now, and so I can. If you had told me it's your favorite a few months ago before that experience with my friend, I'd be like, all right, I gotta be diplomatic here. But yeah. So,
hey, but to be, we're all talking openly here. Velocicoaster is that one's awesome. I think one of the things that I'm looking for in a coaster is, does it have great transitions? Right? Does it give you a moment to breathe? But and that one just has a really good rhythm to it.
Pacing. We call it pacing.
Pacing, right. The pacing is excellent in that ride.
Yeah.
And so for those people who are coaster aficionados more than I'll have to say, when I watched Dr. Mueller in Germany make the layout for the ride, he would close his eyes and he would envision, you could see him, and he's got a PhD in mechanical engineering, and he would sit there and he would, in his head, you could see him looking at the drop and turning in his head, and his eyes would be closed, and he would say, okay, now it's going to go like this. And he would visualize that doing the layout, and then make from that the computer drawings, and then step by step we make the coaster. So
that's really cool. So he's one of your lead design, or he is your lead designer?
Was at the time. He's retired now. He's replaced by Dr. Torsten Ertl. So we have quite a few. The Germans like their PhDs, and there's quite a few PhDs who work at Maurer.
Nice. Well,
Torsten Schmidt does the initial layouts, and he's got a master's degree, and then from there we take it to some of the doctors for the final calculation.
Nice. Interesting. So one last thing I'll say about Rip Ride Rocket, the secret menu, and for listeners that don't know about it, just look up Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket secret menu. You'll find out how to do it. It's too long to describe here in the podcast. Yeah. And I discovered that a few years ago.
Fun.
And
it makes for very good repeatability.
Oh yeah, for more options. Yeah.
I don't know what you found, but I feel like the song, if you play a slow song, when you walk off that ride, it's a different ride depending on what kind of music you listen to. For me. Yeah, no, I
agree. And the one that I found, it's like, when you have a favorite restaurant or favorite thing at a restaurant, it's hard to branch out. That's what happened. I found something so good, and someone told me about it, told me, try this. And they described it as the Thor song from Ragnarok, which is Immigrant Song, Led Zeppelin.
Cool.
113. I have it memorized because I have to look it up, on my phone each time. 113, and it's not a slow song. It's a rock. It's a fast classic rock. I love classic rock, and it fits that so well. It's just But
for those folks who haven't been on that ride for whatever reason, make sure you have your song ready, because it doesn't give you a whole lot of time at the load station to select your song. So you've got maybe 20 seconds. I'm just going off the top of my head, 20, 30 seconds to get it done. Otherwise, it'll do a default song for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had that happen where I'm not hitting the touchscreen quite right. And so that is a good advice for our listeners. Thank you. So, well, on the flip side for you, what would you say is your least favorite coaster or ride?
Can of worms, like you said earlier. So I hope they don't hear this podcast, but I'll just say it. Down in Brazil, I was down there, Hopi Hari Park. I've been there a couple times. It's nice people, nice theming, great thing. But they have an old wooden coaster down there that I was going to go on the ride, and somebody said, "Ooh, don't go on that ride, Steve. It's really rough." And I said, "Now I got to go on it." And they said, "Why? It's going to beat you up. You're going to need a football helmet to go on it." And I said, "Well, I got to know what the bottom baseline is. I sell coasters. I got to know what the roughest coaster is so that I know from there above. So I think just from a business perspective, I need to know this." And I went on, and it was the roughest, really tough, bad. What's for me really just ruins a coaster is bad transitions. So if you get that means a bad snap. So you're in the coaster, also you're going left and it snaps right or something like this. It really jerks your head. That's a bad transition. Yeah. And there can be a lot of reasons why that happens. But yeah, that coaster was very old and very rough and had a lot of bad transitions. And would I go back on it again? No.
So what park was it at?
Hopi Hari. It's in Brazil. It's HOPI space HARI. Once again, lovely people, nice folks. They just have a very rough wooden coaster. I'm not sure who made it. I think it was an American company, maybe way back when. They have still
was it Montezuma?
Yes.
Okay.
So you have a backstory for me on this?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Son of Beast?
Yes.
Have you ridden Son of Beast?
I don't think so.
Probably not. Yeah. Son of Beast was made. It is a notorious. Even in what we call the GP, the general public, especially in Ohio, they a lot of people know about Son of Beast at Kings Island, but especially us Thuzies. Mm-hmm. Son of Beast was made by a company by the name of Roller Coaster Corporation of America. Okay. RCCA, and they are not known for making, or were not known for making, good coasters. And they're out of business. And Son of Beast was a creation of theirs. So when a say a B&M or a Maurer, or an Intimate company that has a lot of experience does something different, that's scary enough. That's like, oh, is it going to work or not? Have they tried it yet? Have they prototyped it? But when you have this sort of not well known, not well experienced company try something crazy like putting a loop on a coaster, and even the rest of Son of Beast, it was an uninspired layout. It became rough, and they took out the loop eventually, and it was a disaster. And it did not last long, terribly long, and was down a lot and kept having to get repaired. So I think at some points it was down for more than a year.
Okay. So
anyway, I did not care for it very much. Well, that was fantastic. Especially the craziest moment. Wow, that will be in the annals of history of this podcast for that question. I will not soon forget that. I don't think I'll ever forget that answer. Wow. Anyway, so let's move on. So I know you've been looking forward to this next segment. This is kind of the last main segment of the interview. We're going to talk for a bit about, what you kind of live and breathe, which is the company you work for, Maurer. Okay. And so to start off with, I know you've been there for 15 years, but just tell myself and the audience about kind of Maurer's history, and again, not your history with them, but, just the history of the company. Yep. And their experiencing, designing, and building, in particular, coasters, because again, this is a mainly coaster podcast. So.
Yeah. So the people who don't know Maurer, I'll try to make it brief. They've been around for about 130 years. Wow. They started off in Germany as a steel fabrication company, and so they would make local bridges and things out of steel around Munich that they needed to make out of steel, and so they would just simply be a local fabrication company. And as the world became a lot smaller, and a lot of the fabrication work would go to Eastern Europe or other places where it was a lot cheaper than Munich, Germany to produce, they said, well, we have two options. We can go out of business, or we can make something that maybe they can't make elsewhere for cheaper. And so they started looking at steel products that would require lots of engineering that Germans do well. And so from that, they started going into the bridge bearing. So one of the bigger division for Maurer, is still a family-owned company. The Beutlers own it. The Maurers sold out to them back in the 60s. And so they make Bridge. So when you go over a bridge, almost anywhere in the world, they make the expansion gaps. So when you see the transition from the mountain to the bridge, there's an expansion gap for heat and all this stuff. And so you have to really do a lot of engineering to make those work in all the high winds and all this kind of stuff from earthquakes. And then that's the other part of that business is they make earthquake dampening devices. So it goes under buildings, structural protection.
Right.
All this is the main part of their business. I'd say probably 70% of the business is this, and they own a lot of the world business everywhere around the world. Not so much in the United States because there's a lot of Buy American clauses and a lot of the government contracts.
Right.
And so, but if you went anywhere else, they would probably maybe you going over a Maurer expansion gap or a Maurer seismic dampener. The Jörg Beutler, the owner of the company and the CEO, has a passion for roller coasters. And so he started back in, I think the first one was 1980s, the division for roller coasters, because obviously it takes for roller coasters a lot of engineering work back to differentiate yourself, makes to make all the calculations for steel. And so they bought the Schwarzkopf drawings and things like this from Schwarzkopf that went out of bankruptcy. And so they took the Wild Mouse and they made a Wild Mouse. They also made for a little bit a drop tower. And then they took the Wild Mouse and made the very first spinning coaster out of it. So Maurer was the very first company to make a spinning coaster. And so from that, they made spinning coasters, and then they branched out to some different train designs. And then ultimately we pared down to make this kind of short, the new spike system, which won quite a few awards as the new innovation, having a 100 horsepower motor on the front that allows you to pretty much make any kind of track design you can dream up now. So we have a class 5 restraint, which means you can do inversions with it, but you don't need an energy calculation. So you don't need a hill anymore. So if the hill scares you like it did me, you can eliminate it. And so you don't need the hill, and you can lay out the track almost any way you want, as long as it doesn't exceed the body limitations for you. So in order to stay competitive, they've had to stay innovative in the market. And so but the basis has always been there is how do we make a product with steel in it that would require a lot of engineering work. And so that's been the basis of getting into the coaster business. And the great part for me personally is Jörg Beutler, the owner. He spends more time in the amusement part because that's the part he likes. Even though the other side's bigger, he lets Dr. Brown do that. So I just call Jörg when I need something, and I just say, hey, we're working with this, and this, and what do you want to do? And it makes it a lot quicker and streamlined, right? So
nice. So that's what he's passionate. So the other side, meaning you still do the bridge work and all that.
They do. I'm not involved with it.
Well, not you. I mean, Maurer. Yeah.
Maurer does. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, like you just mentioned there, how, a couple different times in the company's history, they looked at like pivoting and they looked at, okay, what should we do? And well, we have really good engineers here in Germany, so we should do something that, that's challenging and not something that's easy, something that can differentiate you, which is always good for a company. And that relates to what I said in the very beginning about, why I think some of the best coaster companies and why there's a number of them. A bunch actually. Well, I would say a bunch, but there's at least a few that I can think of that are from Germany. And you guys being one of them, and it, again, with Germany having such great engineers, so it makes a lot of sense that kind of you relating to that there. And then as far as the bridges go, yeah, that, makes sense as far as, being an engineer, I get that. And I love tall buildings. I love bridges. I love structures. That's another thing I like a lot. And I like, experiencing those kind of things, tunnels. And, it's important. And people, we occasionally have bridge collapses in different places of all that happens, but it's becoming more and more rare. And, you definitely want to avoid things like what happened with the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, the original one, which was famous. And, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, look it up on YouTube, Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse, and you won't believe what you will see. This happened many, many years ago, back in the early 1900s, and it's wild because of resonance. But again, you've got to have flexures, and you got to be able to have structures to be able to sway and expand and contract with temperature and weather and wind, and again, buildings, like you talked about that as well. And so I didn't realize that Maurer does because that's some of the most important civil engineering stuff that's done in the world. Is the earthquake retrofitting and the like the stuff for bridges, and those are critical infrastructure that is really not easy to do. So it's very impressive that you guys have that sort of critical engineering skills, as part of your company. Wow, I did not know that.
Since we're here for stories, I'll tell another story. Real quick. The Avatar ride, right, at Disney.
Yeah, Flight of Passage. You mean? Yeah.
So Disney came and talked to us way back before they were going to make it, because they knew that we did steel structures and this kind of vibration and movement. And so they said it's easy to find anybody who wants to make a building. We've got plenty of companies in America make a building, but we're going to induce dynamic loads into that structure all the time. And so, so you've got basically an earthquake going on into the building, on a regular basis, and you have to account for that in the engineering. And so that's a difficult challenge, but Maurer makes, that's what they do on the other side of their business.
Right.
So we marry this up. Unfortunately for me personally, as a sales guy, they didn't want to do it at Maurer because it had no roller coaster to it. There was no roller coaster part to Avatar. And so we didn't do the project. And so, but they did come to and talk to us, which was quite nice of them. And so,
interesting. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So are you, okay. Because not only, have I experienced Flight of Passage, it's fantastic, right? I'm a huge fan of Avatar and the IP, and then love flying theaters. So it's perfect. I love that ride. It's one of my favorite rides in the world. And the first time I rode it was that week I was talking about earlier in 2017, Thanksgiving week. Well, one of the friends in that family that worked at Disney that helped get us all in for free that whole week, he's a former sailor, ballistic naval sub sailor, served in the Navy for years, really good engineer, got hired, and he's worked at the park since retiring out of the Navy, worked at Busch Gardens in maintenance, and then went up to Disney. Now he's at Universal working in maintenance. But when he was working at Disney, this is how good he is. He was opening team for Flight of Passage, and then they moved him over to opening team for Rise of the Resistance. Yeah. So, I mean, it's two of the most complex rides that they have, and big time e-tickets. So he was telling me he was able to backdoor us basically in the opening months of Flight of Passage there in 2017, not wait on 3-hour lines or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And, he was telling me, he was in line with us telling me about the ride, and me being an engineer, I was nerding out. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he told me about, this is after the ride, he didn't want me to, spoiled, is, the room movement, which is part of that earthquake like happening, is done with this giant screw at the bottom that basically screws in and out and moves it up and down because it's an vertical orientation. And I never thought about the fact of how much stress that puts on the structure. And it's a giant structure because it's a grid of rooms that are moving together, which are for capacity. Yeah. But so it makes sense they would come to you guys and so again, thank you for the great segue.
Sure.
Because you're talking about Disney, and while you guys did not work with Disney there, I know on at least one occasion you worked with Disney in a different continent and in years earlier. And what I want to talk about now, and I'm helping you with the segue here. This is a little bit of stretch, but in my opinion, I've ridden several of your coasters. In my opinion, where you guys have done your best work, and again, this is just in my opinion, is in your spinners, your family spinners.
Thank you.
And absolutely. And the first one I ever rode, this was back in 2009 or so. I was in France, in Paris, for work, for a customer meetings and a trade show. And I had never been to Euro Disney. And you can bet I made sure I got to Euro Disney.
Right, sure.
I've actually been to every Disney park on the planet, especially thanks to business travel. And that's as they call it, kids call it these days, a flex. It's a flex I'm very proud of. So I got to go to both Disney parks there in Paris and had a great time. And, the ride, two rides that stuck out for me, of course, the Space Mountain there is, I think, the best Space Mountain because it's the launched one, it's the inversions. But the ride that really sticks out, the one I remember, even more so than Space Mountain, is a ride at Disney Studios Paris called Crush's Coaster.
Yes. And
I was blown away by two things. How well it's themed. It's themed to Finding Nemo, Crush, of course, the turtle. And it's got these, adorable looking spinning cars that look like turtle shells.
Yeah.
And it's inside, it's indoors and outdoors, and it's just so much fun. No, it's not a thrill coaster. Of course,
No,
it's
it's a family coaster.
Family coaster. And if you want a thrill coaster there, you can go ride Rock and Roller Coaster, now the Ironman coaster. But again, I like all coasters, it includes family ones. And I was blown away by how fun that coaster was. And I was an enthusiast back then, but I wasn't, as resourceful, I guess, as I am now. I didn't look up RCD. I don't even know if RCD existed back then. We're talking 15 years ago. But I did not look up who made it, and I didn't really think much of it until later when I started experiencing more of your rides, especially these spinners, and I started kind of learning about them, learning other ones you've done. Well, fast forward to this past fall. I think I mentioned earlier, I've been to Germany a couple times in the past year and discovered my new number one park in the world, which is Phantasialand. And one of the many rides that I absolutely love, and think it's one of the best in its class, along with Colorado River Adventure being the best mine train coaster, Terran being in my opinion, the best coaster in the world, the best launch coaster, Fly being the best flying coaster, the best themed coaster, all best, the best, Chiapas being the best log flume in the world, et cetera, the best. I was blown away by Lynch's Fear and Force.
Yeah.
The theming of it.
It's won a lot of awards.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. And the theming of it, the fact that it's a dual spinner, it's dual tracks, which is always fun to have two tracks next to each other, racing or dueling or whatnot. Yeah. And I don't want to give too much away. I try not to spoil too much on this show, because I know a lot of people have not been to Phantasialand. Yeah. And listeners, I know I keep talking about it because if you're going to make trips to go to a new park, it's not expensive. Park tickets are cheap. The flights aren't bad. Go to Germany. Go to Phantasialand. Go to Europa Park. They're two of the most amazing parks in the world. But in any case, going back to you, Steve. So I won't give it away, but there are some interesting trick track aspects to Lynch's Fear and Force. And I'm not going to say anything else. I'm not going to say what they are when they happen. And that I was blown away and shocked by, because I don't look at POVs in advance. So I was like, whoa, what is this? What just happened here? And why is this happening when we're doing this? And that's all I'll say. But, and again, the fun spinner aspect. You guys have great transitions. You talked about transitions earlier and profiling for your spinners. They are, in my opinion, the best wild mouse style coasters in the world.
Yes. I'm not going to disagree with you. I think, honestly, I haven't. It's a bit of a different style. I mean, my good friends at Gerslauer would say, they like the idea of a raft ride where you're facing each other. One of the reasons Disney came to Maurer to talk about the spinning coaster at Crush was that ours, to be very simplistic and honest, is that ours faces outward, and they have a lot of money in theming. So if you're facing outward, you get to see the Disney theming. If you had Gerslauer, which is facing inwards, you have a harder time seeing the theming, correct?
That's a really good point. And I've ridden some of those Gerslauer spinners, and they're fun. And nothing against Gerslauer. Gerslauer makes some good coasters.
Totally correct, right? It's just, but it's just apples and oranges. One's a little different than the other. And so with Disney or theming, they wanted something facing outward, and then it all worked out quite well as you just are, well articulated. And so it's a very nice ride. We'd love to see them ever duplicate it again, although they haven't. But there's no reason they wouldn't. We're in constant contact with Disney, have a very good relationship.
Nice. That's good to know. One
of the things, I guess, maybe it's probably my guess is probably capacity for Crush.
Yeah.
Because the problem with those really small vehicles is you can't get operationally more than maybe 600, 700 an hour out of a track, maybe 800, just depends. Because what happens is you get cascading in the ride, which means one vehicle's running a little bit slower, just the greases in the wheels is a little bit different, right. It's not as hot. And so the cars behind it start to back up and they start cascading. It's called cascading in the ride. And so you would need to have multiple tracks, kind of like Phantasialand, to get a higher capacity. Well, now Disney, with their capacity requirements, they opened that a long time ago. Their capacity requirements, when they talk to us, are double or triple what they used to. And so because of all the park attendants, and that means for the guests, they don't want the guests waiting that long in line. And guests don't want to wait that long. So if they duplicated Crush, let's say in Florida or something like that, it would be a hard time because the capacity is just a little too low for what they require today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And is that why, and maybe you know this answer, maybe you don't, is that why Fantasyland did dual tracks to capacity?
Higher capacity, correct.
Yeah.
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 But,
yeah.
You have two tracks, you have twice the expense. So,
right. I mean, and we've talked about multiple times here in this interview about how good German engineering is.
Mm-hmm.
And engineering is certainly a part of what I'm about to say, but I just being blown away in my initial visit to Fantasyland in October and then going to Wintertraum in December and being utterly blown away again for so many reasons. It's my goal, and I know they're so secretive. I have the PR contact there, and I keep meaning to email them. I want to have an interview with them. I'd love to interview them on the show. I don't know if they'd be willing to, but if they would, it'd be amazing. But the level, the almost perfection in park planning that they do there, because it's not just finding a ride manufacturer and finding the right one and working with them properly, and it's the theming, it's that putting it all together and cohesiveness. And Disney and Universal are amazing, but in my opinion, Fantasyland is at a whole nother level. It's that German brilliance,
Yeah. No, it's quite well done. You're 100% right. Now, I wish more Americans could go over there and take a look, because it's very compelling and it's very nice and it's very well done. Huh?
Yeah. So anyway, so to get back on track, literally and figuratively. So I kind of gave a big intro there because, again, I'm really passionate about your spinners. I love them. So I'm just curious, kind of a couple of questions on that. So, in terms of whether it be your opinion or just within the company as a whole, is it regarded within Maurer that those coasters are kind of some of your best work, and why do you think they're so good?
Yeah, so when back to in 2016, Maurer reorganized, and we realized commercially we weren't competitive with some of the other big trains that we made. We just got over-engineered into them. So they were big and bulky and heavy, and we were really expensive. We couldn't sell them because they were just too expensive comparatively to what everybody else was selling. So we pared down to the market to two products currently, or I would say two main parts. The spinning coaster, which we found was commercially competitive, still in the market and still in demand. And then secondly, the new spike coaster, which was completely innovative and completely new to the market, which would give us a new niche versus trying to be second or third with a similar ride to, say, Vekoma or Gerstlauer or Intamin. This is different, right?
Right.
All kinds of new stuff. So where can we differentiate ourselves commercially in the market and bring new ideas and new value? The spinning coaster, to your question about best work, we love them. I have many customers when I go to parks like Waldameer and Seabreeze and Lagoon Park who have a spinning coaster from our Hershey Park has a spinning coaster.
Oh yeah, I love Laugh Track.
Laugh Track is great. They all say the same thing. They're like, this is such a great ride that we can't not have this ride or a ride like this.
Nice.
And when I say, what does that mean? Why do you say that? And they say that's a great tweener ride. It's between the little kids and the adults. We have a teenager tweener ride where everybody can kind of go on and still have fun. There's typically a majority of rides are a thrill ride where it's going to hit more the teenager and above. And then there's kiddie rides for the smaller kids. And there's a very few tweener rides that are in the middle. And the spinning coaster from Maurer seems to hit that right on the nail head, or the head of the nail, or however you say that. And so.
Interesting. That's wow. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, that definitely makes a lot of sense to me. That's
the constant feedback I get from the parks. But to that point, I think most of the parks that can afford that coaster, us or Gerstlauer, tend to either have one already. Right. There's very few parks I go to that doesn't have that already in their portfolio at some point.
Right. So it's a tougher.
It's been around for a while.
Yeah. It's sort of saturated. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. So speaking of obviously because you're a sales guy and I'm a sales guy. So sales, it's partly about, relating to your customers, building relationships rapport. But it's also about having the right thing to sell. I mean, you could have the greatest relationship with a customer, but if you don't have what they need, you don't identify their pain or what their needs are, then, you're not going to sell anything. So on that second part of it, this is not something that originally I was planning on asking you, but I just thought of it. So I love your family spinners, like Laugh Track, Crush's Coaster, Winges is amazing. And I've ridden other spinners, Gerstlauer's. They're good, but I don't think they're as good. And I've ridden, Mach's family spinners.
Yeah.
And Mach makes great coasters. And I like Dwervelwind. I just rode that for the first time when I was in Europe in December, Toverland. And Dwervelwind, what's that?
Have you been on their time machine at
Oh, well, that's what I'm going to get to that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Jump again.
Yeah, I'm going to relate because I'm going to take this, of course, back to Maurer. I want to talk about Maurer, and I'm going to relate that here in a moment. So Dwervelwind is a family spinner. It's akin to your family spinners, what you guys already do. And it was fun, but it's not a Winges.
Yeah.
It's not a Crush's Coaster. It's fun though. However, to your point, Mach, they have done amazing things with spinning coasters with their thrill spinners.
Yes.
With, for example, Time Traveler and the absolute amazing Ride to Happiness.
Yep.
And the launches, the rotations, the spinning with in the inversions and the drops and all that stuff. So what I'm wondering is I know you guys do powered launches with, and we'll talk about the Spike here more in a moment. We'll be talking about that. But I know you guys have not done extreme spinning coasters, and you've not done like LSM style launches. Could you? I mean, and I know you may not be able to say anything if you're really working on something, but I'll put it this way. Maybe it's just a statement. You don't even have to answer anything. But I would love to see, given how well you guys have done with the family spinners, and in my opinion, I think you're better than Mach in this way. I would love to see what you guys could do with getting into LSM launches and doing extreme launch spinners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can speak openly on it. It's great. Yeah. It's easy to answer, honestly. To take it to Mach's level, we could totally do that. However, that's a very expensive coaster. If you go look at it, it's very heavy, bulky for all the LSMs and all that to pay.
Yeah.
So you would have to, you would have to re-engineer the chassis to a very large, bulky system, which robust probably is a better word, robust system to handle the LSMs and all the forces you're going to put on it.
Yeah.
Versus just a gravity coaster. And that commercially brings you to a higher level that only a certain number of parks can afford. So if you took that same coaster and you went to a Waldemere or a Seabreeze, they couldn't afford that coaster. And so we would think, what, Mach's already got that commercially, and there's only a few parks, so do we want to go head to head with them? Also, the second part to the answer is that the spinning coaster has been out on the market for a really long time, and there's a lot of parks that have them, and they're kind of saturated. So do we want to spend the money to innovate that to maybe a slightly higher plus and still have, competition with Gerstlauer, Mach, potentially Intamin can make a coaster. They could if they wanted to.
And if they wanted to.
Us. Or do we want to invest more into the Spike system, which is more unique? And could we do some more different things with that is the future for us at the moment. So will we continue to make spinning coasters? Yes. Do I see us making more innovations to it? Probably not, just because of what I said. Commercially, the market's got a lot of players in there. And to jump it up to a higher level, there's really Mach, and there's only a few people who could potentially buy it at that point.
You've made a lot of good points, and that makes a lot of sense. And that's really highly. I learned a lot there. I mean, Ride to Happiness was 15 million euros, which is basically at parity with the dollar right now. So $15 million. And Time Traveler was like 26 million, which that was a major investment by the Christian family. And to your point, like Waldemere, wouldn't be able to do that. So back to it. Technically, I think we'd love to do it, but commercially, we have to kind of think about where to place our bets. Yeah, and you're better off in some cases, competition, Intamin and Vekoma compete a lot, for example,
Sure.
but they're both at a different price point too with a lot of their coasters. And you could say if competing is good, and of course competition is good because it breeds innovation. But on the other hand, in terms of business plan, diversifying yourself or differentiating yourself, I should say, from your competition can be very advantageous. And you guys taking that approach makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
So speaking of that, so I love cruises. I love traveling, and cruises is part of that. I've done several cruises over the years. I've not done one in years. I'm actually about to do one with a friend of mine who gets free cruises because we're gambling in the casino all the time. It's not going to be, unfortunately, on the ship I'd like it to be in terms of this next question. It's going to be on a Royal Caribbean ship, which I love Royal. And I hope that Royal, by the way, starts doing what, Carnival's been doing, with what they did with the Mardi Gras with Bolt. And hopefully one day maybe I'll get on Carnival. I'm not a big Carnival cruise guy. That's just my personal thing. I like Royal style better. But regardless, what you guys did, and you talked about this a little bit earlier, with Bolt, with the Spike Coaster, the first coaster on a cruise ship. And it's a big deal to enthusiasts, absolutely. But it's also a big deal to the general public. I mean, that's what the cruise lines are doing these days. They're putting go-kart tracks and they're doing these crazy theater. They're differentiating themselves, So first of all, I had no idea, and it makes sense because Carnival is an American company. So you were the sales guy. You pitched it in his cubicle.
Yes.
You're the reason why Bolt happened.
Yes. Not to be like to pat myself, but that's what a sales guy is supposed to do, right?
Yeah. No, hey, it's an accomplishment. I celebrate my accomplishments, my big sales, and we got it's nothing. It's not narcissistic to be proud of your accomplishments.
Right. It ain't bragging if it's true.
Yeah, exactly. So very cool that you were the one to do it, and I didn't realize when we set up the interview that you'd be a great person to talk to for this question for that reason. But you've already kind of answered how what I was going to ask you here, which was how the project came to be, because you told the story. Thank you. But can you talk about what unique challenges you faced in making that project a reality?
Yeah. And maybe I'll digress and maybe answer a little bit of your question about the market in general for the cruise ships, because I would love, of course, being a salesperson and seeing such a great hit with Carnival, see it go elsewhere. So I'll start there and then I'll answer the technical side.
Sure. Yeah, great.
Commercially, when I've talked to Norwegian and Royal Caribbean and MSC, they're a little different than the parks and just in the way they think at the moment. And I'll finish with Disney's cruise lines. And it's a funny story because we all like funny stories. So when I talked to Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, and MSC about a spike system that would be different, unique to them, but have the same kind of motor and conveyance, but just like any other roller coaster, be unique to whatever we were doing with them. They all three said the same thing. They said, "Nope, that's what Carnival has. We want something completely different." And I'm like, "Well, we can make it completely different." And just because Six Flags has a coaster and Cedar Fair does quite well with coasters too, and Disney, they're like, "Nope, we want something completely different." What else do you have? No, that's what we have. Okay. So far they've been reluctant to discuss further than what I just said. They want something completely different. Then Disney came along and bought out of bankruptcy the Genting ship.
Yes.
Died during COVID. So to the funny part of the story, during IAPA, this was announced they bought the ship, and that ship has a spike coaster on it. It's Disney's newest ship. Already had a spike coaster built for it.
It does.
Yeah. So they have a coaster, and so when they came up to me at the show and said, "Listen, Steve, we bought the Genting ship, and it's got your spike coaster on. It's a different layout than the Carnival ship, and we've got to talk about and learn everything we need to know about it." And I said, "Listen, if you want to buy a spike coaster from me, you don't need to buy a whole cruise ship. I'll sell you one with but if you need to buy a whole cruise ship, that's fine. We can do it that way too." So that said, my hope is, because I've asked Disney, I said, "Hey," this was before they bought the Genting ship. I said, would you buy a spike system, even though the Carnival has one? And they said, of course we would. Why wouldn't we? So their mentality after running theme parks was just as you would expect. It was, we'd have no problem buying. We'd, of course, theme it differently. We'd Disney it and make it our own. But yeah, why wouldn't we? Was their exact answer. So my point is, I hope for the industry, back to commercial side, that if Norwegian and Royal and MSC see that Disney has taken a cruise ship and made it their own and done their own system, then they could potentially also do something for themselves, even though that is the conveyance, the motors is similar, but it's theirs. And so we'll see how that goes, right? So did I say that?
Yeah, interesting. So a couple things to unpack there. So first of all, I had heard independently about the Genting ship, not about having a spike coaster, but I listen to a lot of other podcasts, and a couple of them have covered that, especially the Dis Unplugged, Pete Werner's podcast, Dream of Unlimited Travel, a great podcast. I recommend them. And they talked about it a month or two ago, back during IAPA. And around that time, and surprised actually they didn't mention about the spike coaster. So that to be cleared for our listeners, that ship is under construction. It's not a ship it's not like a case where a ship is finished and another cruise line buys it after it's in operation.
Correct. Yeah, yes. It's still in the shipyard. It was in the shipyard during COVID. The coaster was more or less finished and ready to be installed, because in the shipyard prior to COVID, you have to be almost like an assembly line. You have to be on time and in place. Otherwise, there's all kinds of fines. So we had to get everything up and made for the Genting ship prior, all the test and adjust and everything at the factory, and made the whole track before shipping it to the shipyard. And then COVID hit and everything went sideways. So
yeah, and interesting too. Yeah, so and that ship was being designed for the Asian market.
Correct.
And now Disney's buying it, and it's not, who knows, what's going to wind up happening as they finish it and where it's going to wind up, and it could wind up rotating. But Asian cruise lines, Asian ships designed for those markets are very different than Mediterranean, or certainly U.S. Caribbean. That's Alaska, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how Disney kind of makes it work into their portfolio, because it's not like their other ships,
right?
And I've never done a Disney cruise line, Disney cruise. I've always wanted to, and now knowing that there's going to be a spike coaster on this ship makes me and see, this is what you want to hear as a sales guy. You want to hear, the end users, they want it. Right. The ones that are paying the money. So I would, and again, I hope to maybe get on that ship now that especially knowing this. But Royal, I love Royal. I'm excited. I'm really excited. About 10 days here to get back on a Royal Caribbean ship for the first time in like 11 years. And their thing, as far as entertainment, amusement, they're more into like the zip line stuff, because they have that on their ships. They have that, at their Coco Cay and Labadee, their private islands. Yep. They also do iFly, but that's a contracted thing as well. But their really big thing is their water slides. Their water parks. Sure. And I love water parks, and I'm looking forward to experiencing some of that stuff, and hopefully eventually getting on the Icon, their new class coming out this year, which is going to have a huge water park at sea. So I get why maybe right now they're not focusing on you guys, but maybe that'll change, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, if it's driving the gate, as we say in the park world, or driving bookings, I guess in their world.
Yeah.
At some point you got to look at it, and so, but give it time.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the fact that the Genting ship has a spike coaster makes me ask the question, to the degree that you can answer this. Obviously, in some cases, they're too early on to talk about. Are there other installations happening or going to happen that you know of already of that spike coaster on cruise ships?
Yeah. So the Genting, just a little bit. If the Carnival ones, we've done Mardi Gras and Celebration are already out there. One's in Miami, Celebration, the other one's at Port Canaveral.
Okay.
So we have two ships that are more or less exact copies of each other. So the layouts on each one are exactly the same.
Right.
So we have a third ship in production. It's yet a third copy of the ship. Carnival said it's that layout that they have for Mardi Gras. It's their most popular ship. It's their biggest ship they've ever done.
Right.
And so at the moment we're talking about a 4th ship, and that's still in design, and who knows exactly how that'll all go, but we talk every week about it. And so we'll see how that design comes about. More I can't say on that one. The Genting ship obviously wasn't involved with Carnival, a competitor. And so Carnival was the first to market with the first roller coaster on a ship. And in Genting's marketing is the biggest. So theirs is a little longer than Carnival's. And so Disney will be able to say, well, they have the longest roller coaster if they really want to go down that rabbit hole. And so,
yeah, gotcha. Now the Spike coaster, the way it's implemented on these cruise ships, it holds what 2 people at a time?
Yeah, it looks like a motorcycle front and back. And so it has twice the acceleration for Porsche 911. And I didn't really answer your technical questions about the challenge, and I'll kind of run through that real fast.
Yeah, right. We got away from it. Yeah,
we got away. I drove you off on the commercial. So the technical side is we had put all the vehicles in saltwater baths and try to wring out whatever we could as far as what would corrode out in the marine environment early on, what kind of wirings would corrode and connection points and things like that, and what we could either bolster with marine type of wiring, for example, or what do we need to replace on a faster basis out on the ship.
Sure.
Additionally, out on the ship, we have a complete spare vehicle out there that we could cannibalize if we need parts. So because a ship, you aren't close to, a UPS store where you can have something FedExed or whatever the next day if you need a new part. And so we had to have a complete new vehicle waiting if we need to go get stuff.
Those good points. Yeah.
And so there's 2 out on the track running at all times, and they run twice through the circuit, because on the ship we don't need the high capacity that you need on land, and because you're on a ship for an entire week. Unlike a lot of gated parks, it is an upcharge on the ship, and I think it's $15 or $17. I think it's $17 upcharge. But that also keeps the capacity low, so they make it quite easy for you to go take a ride. Just go with your little wristband and put your wristband on there and go take a ride, right? And so it's honestly, it's beautiful. You're 18 stories above the ocean, and every time you go to a different port, there's a different view, and it's unique. It's so unique. And it's a great smooth track with good transitions, and you drive it yourself. When can you drive your own roller coaster?
Right.
The acceleration is so massive on it that when we had the drones trying to take the videos, the drone couldn't keep up. It would just blow past the drone. So we had to get the drone running before the person took off, so we continued to film. So
wow, that's pretty cool. Interesting. So I'm just going to ask this. So as far as the drone stuff, so are you guys happy with the filming you've been able to do, or are you still kind of looking maybe to find someone that help you kind of with that challenge? Or
no, that was just when they were able to make the filming work. They just had to have the drone do a running start, and then they were able to film it. When they first ran it, the Spike left the drone in the dust if it was a race, right?
Right.
So they gave the drone a running start, and it worked out just fine.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, one of my follow-up questions you already answered was the capacity. I was already kind of doing the math in my head. These cruise ships, 4,000 people, some have 6, but not Carnivals. They're not that much. I think what is the that class. The Mardi Gras,
5,000 something is 5,000.
The middle, okay.
On board, I believe, and then
right. But you're going to have a mix. You're going to have young kids. You're going to have older people that don't ride, and plus it's an upcharge, so that helps too. And I would totally pay the $15, but I'm a enthusiast, so.
My guess is, I've never asked Carnival this, but just my personal guess: if you're on the ship for an entire week and you're not elderly or something else, you got a whole week. You're probably going to go up there and get a ride. So they're probably going to get at least 4,000 people sometime in that 1 week to go up there and spend $15 $20, right? Would be my guess, or maybe more. You may have people spend it a couple of times because it's really fun. So.
Yeah, for the cruise I'm doing in a couple of weeks, it's on the Independence, which is a similar size ship. It's I think a little bit smaller, 4,000. passengers or so. It doesn't have, again, a coaster, but it has like escape room, which I love escape rooms, and other sort of lower capacity things like this. And already reserved a slot for escape room. Wasn't hard to get, a couple weeks before the cruise. I just did it a few days ago. And yeah, so and I believe I'm a fan. I'm a planner, so I have no problem with, the general kind of reserving in advance sort of things, as long as it's not, too crazy and too much thought involved. It's just a thing here and there. Just a sub experience. Yeah, no problem. Like the Void, I did the same thing when I did it a couple times. But that sounds very reasonable. 15, even $20, whatever it may be. It sounds very reasonable. And
make you feel better. I'm actually in a couple of weeks also going on a Royal Caribbean cruise. Back to my Disney days. I used to work 3 years in a Norwegian pavilion, and my Norwegian buddies and I have stayed great friends. And so we have 20 Norwegians and I on a ship in the end of March, going on a 10-day cruise for Celebrity. And so that Disney connection still from way back then, I still got it. We still have so much fun together. Awesome. And so, we're going on a cruise, and it doesn't have a roller coaster on it. And I've told the Carnival guys, they know, they're kind of like they're kind of like our industry. They're like, oh, just like I would say it's Gerstlauer or it's Sophie and B&M. They're like, oh, that's a good ship. You should try this, and you should try this restaurant. And they're super good, right? It's no big deal.
Yeah, it's not. Thankfully, the theme park industry is not, for the most part, cutthroat. No. It's like you said, fairly friendly, and the more I've gotten to know people, yeah. So by the way, what ship are you going on a Royal?
It's the Celebrity. Celebrity is the brand.
I thought it was not Royal Caribbean. Celebrity. It is
Royal Caribbean, but there's several Celebrity brand. I think.
Oh, right, the sub brand. Right.
The sub brand, right, of Royal.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with. I'm more familiar with Royal's main line, but I've done their Oasis class, which is amazing. Absolutely. Well, the Norwegians
set this whole thing up, and they're like, "Steve, you have to go." Okay, fine. and to your point about booking early on stuff, they go, "Yeah, we have to book early because the Americans book up everything because they're very organized." The Norwegians a little more free flow, right?
Right. Yeah, that's that culturally. Of course, we're painting with a broad brush stereotypes here, which often are true, but not. Yeah, that makes sense. Always. But so one last question on the Mardi Gras and all the coasters on these ships, the Bolt and all that. So they're powered with a 100 horsepower motor. So is this electric powered?
Correct. So it has a bus bar or electric rail that's where you can't touch it, but it pulls power from that and it feeds to a 100 horsepower motor. Motor's been around forever, and then it has a gear on the motor, and the gear runs in a track. And so just think of a gear teeth.
Right.
The teeth are on the track, and it runs around the track. So that means it's very, very precise, and it has a lot of. And it has a control system, and everything's done through the motor. It's very cool. Disney loved it when they saw it. They're like, "Oh, this is such a great idea," because you don't have any sensors out on the track. You have to mess with.
Oh, right. Because
it counts rotations of the gear.
Yeah. I've worked with motors quite a bit. Yeah. Not so much in sales, but in previous lives, as we say, in my career. Before working in sales, I used to work in sales. Yeah.
But my point being is, out on a ship. In hot weather and all that, if you have a sensor that you need to be messing with, a lot of times those things will have difficulties and faults because the one sensor is moving a little bit as the heat expands the rail or moves the metal from expansion, and so sometimes that makes it a little bit problematic and tricky. This has none of that because it's doing a completely different system where it counts the rotations of the gear to tell the computer control system where it is at all times. And so it's interesting. The reliability is quite good.
So that's kind of what I was going to follow up that question or that comment with. So the reliability has been really good in these installations on these Celebration Mardi Gras. Nice.
We've had like anything when you install the first, test and adjust. We've had some issues here and there, but nothing difficult. Right.
Very nice. Wow. Very nice. Excellent. Okay. Well, kind of one last question, kind of wrap up the Maurer part of the interview, and then we'll finish up the whole interview itself with a couple more questions. Okay. So, I was at IAPA last year, and I found out and kind of got to check out a little bit a new innovation you guys have come up with, which I think is it kind of extends the bolt kind of technology, the spike coaster technology, if I'm understanding correctly. So why don't you tell our listeners about what you've done with your ride vehicles, and if you could confirm, is it something that can be done with a spike coaster?
Yeah, so there's a couple of innovations to the spike system. When you have a drivable coaster with only 2 seats, it's great, driving is awesome, but if you have lower capacity because there's only 2 seats, and so on each vehicle. So we rolled out a Spike Fun, which is a train version of that. So this one you can't drive, but you have a higher capacity. But what that does do is allow you still to lay out the track any way you want to. You can go backwards, forwards on the track, and have multiple accelerations on the track at different points. So 4 or 5 different ride profiles. The restraint system on it is very cool. So just imagine a seatbelt that's very high tech, and the seatbelt allows for Class 5 inversions, meaning you can go upside down with just a seatbelt.
Wow,
which is really cool. And so all the technology you've seen to holding you in restraint is all just now into a seatbelt, which is really neat because from a safety perspective, there's all kinds of body types. There's bulbous people, there's tall, there's lanky, there's all this. The seatbelt that self-tightens down and it has lots of redundancy within the belt can tighten down to anybody. It really just goes right in. So there's no click into your gut or anything like that. So almost every kind of body type imaginable is allowed to ride on with the seatbelt. And so the other side of the seatbelt is if you were doing inversions that were very high up, for example, on a brand new coaster, something like this, you may find that the pucker factor is kind of high. So because of that, we made another just standard over-the-shoulder restraint. So if the park says, that's a little bit too scary for my guests, if that's their decision, we also have a new Class 5 restraint that they can choose from. And then lastly, some of the seats on the new Spike Fun. Spike Fun is a marketing name for a train. Allows the seats to tilt back, so you could potentially do wheelies on the track, or you could potentially go over inversions and slide down the other side of the hill. So you could actually rotate the seat while you're in the middle of flying around the coaster track, which is kind of fun, right? You get to control your own pitch and angle and all that kind of stuff on the seat. And so that's what the kind of the main innovations we had out on the floor at IAAPA. And all that's got because you were talking about earlier, it pulls electricity from the rail. We can have all kinds of lighting and onboard sound as much as they want, because we're not having batteries on there. There's no batteries
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about earlier about the 100 horsepower motor on the existing Spike coaster designs. If it was a battery based, and I was hoping it was bus bar, like thing where you don't have to worry about batteries, because that can be a challenge. So that's good to know. So yeah, I experienced the tilting seat myself. I actually got to try it, demo it. And that's actually kind of what led to this interview, is talking to people there, and they gave me their cards, and I got in touch with you through that, which was great. I'm glad I did. And but I got to try out the tilting seat, but it was I didn't get into a discussion with them about how it could be used like you just described. It was good to kind of hear the other side of it, of how that would be used on a coaster. And it was again, like the Spike design about controlling the speed, it's kind of cool to be able to control the tilt yourself. That's really neat. Yeah. I'm very curious, though. I did not hear when I was there about the seatbelt, about the Spike Fun. Mm-hmm. So a couple things there. So first of all, on the seatbelt side of it, besides just describing it, I get it a little bit more familiarly, if to use that term, because I don't know if you experienced this at IAAPA last year, and I forget the name of the company, but there was a company there that had a frog hopper that is seatbelt only.
Okay. I didn't know. The IAAPA week is my busiest week of the year.
Yeah, yours too.
The restroom. I'm excited.
Yeah, you got a lot distracting you, so we need to experience it. But I myself and various friends that were there, it was kind of funny what wound up happening during the week that I was, during IAAPA. Some people didn't get there till later in the week. And I love playing tour guide. It's kind of part of me loving helping people. Sure. Is I love playing tour guide at parks and sightseeing, whatever. And so I was playing tour guide, and I was leading people around, kind of greatest hits. And, oh, you got to see this, you got to check this out, And some of these people, they're covering for their YouTube channel or even other podcasts or whatever. So one of the things I was sure to take them by, and it was this frog hopper, and doing a frog hopper, and it's an adult one, it's not a kid one, with a seatbelt only. The airtime there again, I like airtime. I told you I do like airtime. It was wild. So a coaster with just a seatbelt, yeah, wow. Now, the Spike Fun, whether it be with the seatbelt or with the over the shoulder restraint, is that something that could be put on a cruise ship, or is that too much for a cruise ship?
The Spike Fun, we could totally put on a ship. Maybe the biggest difference is, because we were talking about earlier, the capacity requirements on the ship isn't high at all, comparatively.
Right.
I think the ship would prefer that the guests be able to drive their own coaster is more marketable and interesting than because both the traditional Spike and the Spike Fun can have that seatbelt, or both can have that seatbelt design on it. So the two-seater can do everything the Spike Fun can do.
I see.
And more is shortly. But the drawback to the two-seater is the capacity. And
I see.
Yeah,
the regular Spike coaster that could get the seatbelt only restraint.
Oh, it has it right now. You go on the ship and it has just a seatbelt. It has.
Okay. So the Celebration of Mardi Gras, they have a seatbelt only.
Correct.
Oh, I didn't know that. Again, I've not experienced these yet. Talking to you, I want to now more, and I'm like, well, I could do another Carnival cruise. I didn't have a great experience, but this was years ago with an older ship. This is not brand new ships, and so I'm like, Royal Caribbean, come on, get with the program. You got to talk.
So if you really just want to go drive the coaster and you have just too busy of a schedule, you can do what their competitors do and everybody does on their ship. They gave me their secret for work, because just consider it work. They said what you do is you go down and you buy a cruise for whatever the cheapest amount you can get. Let's just say $1,000 for argument.
Yeah.
And then you take the Mardi Gras or Celebration to the first port. You get off at the first port and you fly home for work, but you get to test it. And this is what they do. They said, listen, if there's a new feature on one of the other ships, it's work, and so they'll go to the first port and get off and then fly home, but they've gotten their experience in. Right?
Okay, are you saying for competitive analysis, like
correct?
Oil will do that on. Oh, okay.
Oh yeah. So they'll do that rather than they're not going to give their employees a full week's vacation, right?
Right. Interesting. Well, after we're done with the recording here, I'm gonna check the Celebration of Mardi Gras itineraries, because my big thing is I don't have a ton of PTO with work right now because I started a new job in November. So the Independence, for example, I leave Friday, come back Monday morning, so it's easy to minimize time off work. So if Celebration or Mardi Gras have those reduced itineraries over a weekend, then I'm sign you up. But anyways, otherwise I'll do them later when I have more time. But thank you for kind of going through the little journey there, talking about the cruise ship stuff and the Spike technology. And I didn't know about Spike Fun, and that's wow. You guys have got some good things going on. So I'm looking forward to seeing. Sounds like I'll probably more likely see a Spike Fun at a park, land-based park.
I think so. The racing aspect of we from Mirabilandia and Ducati, we put a dueling coaster, so you can.
I heard about that. Yeah,
so you go to Italy and see the dueling coaster. But you're going to need a bigger budget for that, right? So it would probably be more your middle to upper park that could do that kind of racing. It's just commercially, but the Spike Fun could probably fit in a smaller to medium park as well. Of course, a larger park easily. So
when I heard about the Mirabilandia one, that interested me just from the theming aspect, because I rode sport bikes for years, and so I love the concept of that. That's really cool, and that's why I love Tron so much. But that's another story. But anyways, all right. Well, thanks for talking all about Maurer Rides, and I learned a lot about you guys I didn't know. I hope our listeners did too. Fascinating, really some really cool stuff there. So, and I'm excited for what you guys have got going and planned for the future. So the last couple questions here. These are kind of thought-provoking questions. And the first one is we added it here in season 3, and I think it's going to be here to stay because it's very poignant. We added it because one of our biggest fans of Coaster Challenge from the very early days, even before we were a podcast, was a young guy named Dusty, as a teenager, and he sadly suddenly passed away a few months ago. And David and him were friends because Dave was friends with the family, him and his mom and his dad, and it's very sad, very unfortunate, and it put mortality at the forefront for David and for the rest of us by association. And so David said, yeah, we should start asking this question. And I'm glad he did, because I think it's a great question. So that's kind of to explain to you, Steve, where this question's coming from. So question is how would you, after you pass away, hopefully that's not for a long time, of course, how would you like your family and friends, your colleagues, people that knew you to remember you by?
It's I think kind of easy for me. I'm being a salesperson. I just love to hang out with my friends. And what do I want them to remember is hopefully I'll remember some of the laughs we've had together. Because usually every week I'm laughing with somebody, having a good time. And if they can remember, unfortunately, when I think about life, unfortunately, in 100 years from now, if you think back, who do I know in history from 100 years ago? Well, George Washington, Thomas. The list is very small. Right. So the people who may remember you at all after some time is just the people that you're with more often than not. And if they can just remember, yeah, Steve was great. He always made me laugh. We always had a good time together. And he was always somebody who was dependable. Then I would be happy with that. That would be because I don't expect to have, 500 years from now, somebody to remember my name. But the people who were around me at the time would be enough for me. I'd be totally happy with that.
Well, to tie back to one of the earlier questions and your amazing answer to it, I guess I suppose that a lot of these people, they wouldn't know you, but a couple of the coworkers that were involved, they knew you like the driver. Certainly, you were dependable that day with that monorail and stopping it from a tragedy. I mean, wow! I mean, that's dependability right there.
Yeah, dependability, right?
Hard and you're, as far as I'm concerned, you were a dependable guy for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, and hopefully we had some good fun stories as well that made people think, laugh, and say, "Oh, no, that's funny," right? And
I mean, we cover serious topics on this. We certainly have some other questions that are more lighthearted, but our main mission is a serious but a very important and valuable topic. Again, theme park therapy and improving one's lives while having a great time. It's like a win-win. And that's what, parks are so amazing for that reason. But, we tend to have some fun in these interviews, and you and I have had some good chuckles here and some good stories. And that's always great when we have that balance. So I appreciate you kind of lending that sense of humor. Here we have two sales guys talking to each other. Of course, there's going to be some laughs.
Absolutely right. And I appreciate you taking the time and to chit chat with me and learn a little more about what we do and my day and your day and all that kind of good stuff. And if you'd like me to come back at another day to talk about something else and blah, 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 I'm happy to do it. It's good times. It's fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have had, there's a small select group of people. There's 3 people now, I think, we've had on the podcast more than once. And, it's all it is, when you guys, if you, debut something new, that, see it at IAPA, and, that's kind of the kind of thing that I could see definitely having you on again, and very likely. So
I'm available whenever you wish. Right. And so
we really appreciate it. It was really fun. So absolutely. So kind of to wrap things up in a neat, nice wrapping with a bow on it and all that. We always like to ask the one kind of last main question, and we'll kind of have a little promotional stuff at the end. And that last main question is, and this could be, you're talking about getting, you gave a good piece of advice there about, hey, if you want to experience the bulk coaster, but you don't have the time, if you have the money, or, look for cheap ways, just get off the ship for work reasons and fly back, and you can plan that in advance too, because you know where the ship's going to go. That was a great example of advice. But if you want to share advice along those lines, or advice about theme park therapy or facing your fears, the people that need the theme park therapy the most. Like I was telling you my story before we started recording about a depression that I was in and going to Disneyland, how that really helped me recover, helped me get that theme park therapy before I knew even theme park therapy was a thing years ago. People with depression and anxiety and stress, which is a form of anxiety, they need this help. So if you have any words of wisdom in any of those areas, feel free to share those now.
Oh, I think we hit on it pretty good earlier. There wouldn't be much I would add to it. I personally have 3 words that I've used in swimming. I've used it before speeches. I haven't really used it before coaster, but I guess you could do it. In my head, when I'm ready to give it my all in a swim meet or do a really good speech, the last things I say in front of my head is, let's do this. And I walk in and do it. Let's do this. And that works for me. So maybe have your version of let's do this and go do it. Right. And take that next step and go do your best and let the cards fall where they may. And hopefully if that's a fear that that you wanted to overcome, great. And if you don't do it this day, well, there's always tomorrow. Try it again the next day. Right. And until you get it done. And so find your mantra. Yeah. That'd be my,
once again, it never fails. And I know that a lot of people that when they're a guest on the show, they haven't necessarily listened to previous interviews or many of them, if at all, and that's to be expected. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes there's no inadvertent cheating, so to speak, with this question. But what I'm getting at is, and we talk about this a lot, is again, we're well over 100 interviews in now, and it seems like each person is given a unique answer to that question, which if it wasn't that way, that's fine. In the other case, if someone has similar advice, I think, wow, that's reinforcement. That's like really good advice. More than one person suggested it. But it's kind of cool to see this unique advice, to get this increasing large swath of different recommendations that our listeners and the rest of us that even produce the show can use. And it's like, just do it. But having a mantra, I don't think anyone's even suggested a mantra before. They've suggested how to look at things or whatnot, but something to say in your head. Yeah. And you know what? It's very powerful, because mantras are about they generally are about, and this is about positivity, about having a positive attitude in that moment, right before that public speech. Or whatever.
You got to get your head in the right. You got to get your head in the right spot before you do a lot of things, and that'll help you succeed. And so I have a mantra. Maybe that'll help somebody else, right? And so find yours.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So just wow, it's very impressive, very, very powerful. So well, again, Steve, thank you so much. This has been wonderful, and you definitely. I've never had a bad interview, quite frankly, but they've always been great. But each interviewee, and you certainly are one of them as well, have earned kind of this last one, which is your chance to promote yourself and, of course, to promote Maurer. I mean, you've been talking about Maurer, but basically what I'm getting at is, if you want to share, some of the people that work for the in the industry, they like to put themselves out more than others. Right. Like Mike Aiello, and and he's a good example. But if you have if you want to share your personal Instagram, Facebook, that's fine. If you don't, I totally get it. But certainly, I'm sure besides that, or in addition to that, you would definitely want to promote, how people can learn more about Maurer. So please share away, website, Instagram, social media, etc.
Yeah. For me personally, the best way is just, you can find my email for work is s.boney@maurer-rides.de, which I make fun of, because that's the most complicated, long German email address that nobody would have.
It is.
Let me do that again, because it's really difficult.
Yeah, please.
S for Steve, Boney, Boney, at Maurer -rides.de for Deutschland, Germany. Only a German engineer would think, yeah, that's a good one. Everyone can get that, right? So that's now that you've got it, you can find me there. That's the best way. And then as far as Maurer, they've got a really good website, Maurer-Rides. You can just Google Maurer Rides and it'll come up immediately. Also, I would just encourage somebody, if they want to look at some of the Maurer videos, go to YouTube and hit Maurer Rides. And there's quite a great portfolio we were talking about Mirabilandia. We were talking about the shifts. There's a lot of example rides from Spike and Spike Fun on there. So you'll have a fun time just going through the YouTube stuff if you prefer that format. And so that's where I would say to come find us.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. people can check that out. I was checking out your website actually before the interview to kind of prepare for it. But yeah, no, that's awesome. You guys do have a good website. I agree with that. Well, thank you again for taking the time. I know you're busy. You know, us sales guys are very busy, traveling and everything else. So thank you for taking the time to speak to me. It was a really, really great discussion. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I had a lot of fun, and I appreciate your entire evenings. And thank you for anyone who was out there listening to us today. So thank you as well.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you want to see more of us, we upload every Friday. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, all at Coaster Challenge. Links are in the description below. Thanks for joining us here today.